2020, actually, January 8th? No, that's the minutes, I'm sorry. It is February 19th, and it's 7:26 p.m. All rise to salute the flag. Mr. Esposito, would you lead us to the flag salute, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board of Borough Hall, by email to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and submission to all persons entitled the same as provided by law. I would like to remind all members of the public that we have 3 fire exits, one in the back, one behind us here, and one behind over there. And in addition, we're being recorded by both audio and video for purposes of creating a record for the public portion of this meeting. If any member wishes to speak, all they need to do is get recognized by the chair. You come up, state your full name and address, and just so you know, you'll be recorded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayor is absent.
Yes, he is got the flu, and he did not come back from China, so we're in good shape.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Here.
Ms. Boland,
Here.
Mr. Bartoloni,
Here.
Mr. Merman,
Here.
Mr. Grosso,
Here.
Mr. Craig,
Here.
Mr. Kaplan,
Here.
Councilman Canigo,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Esposito.
Here.
Okay. I'm going to move from the agenda real quick. We have a swearing in to do tonight. We have a new member, Mr. Gary Esposito. He is our second alternate, I believe. And Marina, our attorney, will swear you in. Gary, just look up first when she comes over. Here's the Bible. And just look this way real quick, so we have this for posterity. I'll send it out to you. Good.
Okay, so just raise your right hand, please. I state your name.
I, Gary Esposito,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution
that I will uphold the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New Jersey,
of the State of New Jersey.
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and to the government
and to the government
established
established
in the United
in the
States
United States
and in this state
and in this state
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
and that I will faithfully,
and I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all of the duties of the office
all of the duties of the office
of Land Use Board Attorney,
Of
or
Land-
Land Use Board, Board member, of the Borough of River Edge,
the Borough of River Edge,
to the best of my
to
ability,
the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Quickest law degree I ever saw.
You're part of a long-term family now. All right, I do have one thing off the menu for tonight, and that is the resolution appointing Cleary, Jacoby, Alfieri, Jacobs, LLC as our land use attorneys. This was already approved by the mayor and council. They were approved by us in the beginning of the year. This is just approving the resolution. So any questions, comments?
Need a motion?
Al's still looking there.
No. I was
Okay.
looking at something else.
Any comments, anything? Okay, now I'll take a motion.
Motion made for approval.
And do I have a second?
Second.
And I guess roll call on that.
Okay, Mr. Arkelian?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grosso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Yes.
Councilman Canigo?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Motion passed. Congratulations, congratulations.
Now you can cash your check.
Mr. Grasso, if you would, please. Okay, next up is the approval of our newly defined minutes, which I think everybody finds a little more user-friendly. Do I have any comments on the minutes from,
Mr. Chairman, I believe I have a correction.
okay?
The front page with the members present, the mayor is referred to as mayor-elect.
Yes.
I believe
That is
he
a
was
correction.
already sworn in at that point.
Yep.
He kept saying it, so.
Well, that's fine. And at the last line on that page is another entry of the same.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, so just, we'll just
Actually sworn in.
strike elect.
Well,
Yeah, he was.
I asked councilman and.
January 6th was the...
Yep, the 6th was the city dime.
There you go.
Okay.
So, and, Mayor, if you see us, we wish you well, hope you feel better. Okay, next up is this, now I'm gonna take that to the end.
And accept the minutes?
Hmm?
Motion for the minutes?
Yeah, oh yeah, motion for the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, any abstain?
Okay.
Okay. So the next thing we're gonna go to is, we're gonna skip the discussion for Fay Housing till the end. We're gonna bring up the folks from Jersey Mike's. This is Jersey,
Questions, do we have to approve the resolution for the planner and the engineer as well? I saw
they
it in the
didn't
packet.
give me that on here.
The engineering-
Actually, they did, okay, so let's go through all the professionals just to make it official. So, that would bring up, Rob Costa as our engineer. Any questions, concerns, comments? Have a motion to approve, the resolution, naming him our engineer for the year.
So moved.
Second? Second. Roll call, please.
Okay. Chairman Arkelian?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Casler?
Yes.
Councilman Canigo?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, and the next one would be, Mr. Behrens. Mr. Behrens is our planner. Again, we approved him in the the first meeting in January, so this is just a formality, but, do I have a motion on the, resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
All right. Councilman Arkelian?
Yes, that was the chairman.
Or Chairman? Mr.
That's the
Boland?
councilman. But we look alike.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Casler?
Yes.
Councilman Canigo?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now the folks from Jersey Mike's come up. Good evening, Counselor, how are you?
Good evening, Timothy Corlison from Connell Foley on behalf of Prospect Capital Restaurants, also, which will be operating the Jersey Mike's franchise. Why before turning with all the,
Let me just read the application to the record. It's Jersey Mike's Prospect Capital Restaurants, Christopher Reggio and, okay, and Philip Nisbet, 1047 Main Street, that's block 1404 and lot 301, and they're here for a food handler's license through a site plan approval.
yes, Chairman. So, we did also notice sign variance because it was raised by Mr. Behrens during the process. That issue has been resolved with myself and Mr. Chakowski, and I believe now Mr. Behrens. There's no sign variance, there's no parking variance needed, there's no sign variance needed. We're simply here on the food handler's license approval. And Mr. Ocasio is one of the owners who's here to answer any questions that the board may have.
Right now, we're just doing completeness now, Counselor, so, Tom?
It's, as you heard, it's a fully conforming application. The materials we have are sufficient to hear the application seeking, so it can be deemed complete.
Ms. Stanley?
And I was able to review the proofs before the meeting, and the board does have jurisdiction.
Very good. Motion to take this to a regular meeting?
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Chairman Arkelian?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Casler?
Abstain.
Councilman Canigo?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Okay, we'll call you up in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Next up on completeness is 297 Wales Ave, New Jersey Property LLC, Block 303, Lot 3. It's a two-lot subdivision on a 100 by 150 lot.
Yes, good
Good
evening,
evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Frank Ferraro, firm of Ferraro and Stamos, here on behalf of the applicant, NJ North Property LLC. As indicated, this is a request for a minor subdivision, subdivide one existing lot into two lots with a variance for lot width. This particular zone, the R1 zone, required 75-foot width. The two new lots would have 50-foot lot width, but because of the depth of the lots in that area of the neighborhood, they would be conforming as to minimum lot area. That in a nutshell is our application. We have our engineer who will go over the subdivision plan, and we have a planner to go over the requested C variance for the lot width.
Tom?
As you heard, the applicant's requesting variance relief for lot width. The application itself is complete from our standpoint in terms of the application materials, so can be heard this evening.
Ms. Finley?
And yes, prior to the meeting, I reviewed the proofs and the application materials, and the board has jurisdiction to hear this matter.
Okay, we'll call you up in a few minutes.
Great, thank you.
All right. We'll take Jersey Mike's back now. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. A motion to send this to a regular meeting?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Killian?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Caslow?
Yes.
Councilman Canito?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Abstain?
And Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
All right. You can come back up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay. This is the Jersey Mike's application, Prospect Capital Restaurants, Christopher Residio and Philip Nisbet. 1047 Main Street, Block 1404, Lot 303, and they're strictly for a food handler license, for site plan approval. Good evening again.
Yes, Your Honor, Timothy Corrison, Connell Foley for the applicant, Capital Prospect Restaurant. You're familiar with the space, the Blue Crossing. This is a portion, about 1,200 square feet or so, portion of the space that was occupied by Francesca's way back when. We're within the maximum restaurant usage permitted, so there's no variance there. The sign has been to be fully compliant, so we're just here on the food handlers.
Now, is this taking the existing vacancy completely, or are you subdividing that?
Portion of it, Your Honor. Chairman. The other, there is lease negotiation for the other portion with the
Non-food.
yes, I think it's a third.
Okay.
That's ongoing, but if that, once that occurs, assuming nobody leaves, it'll absolutely be fully leased.
And then with medical, I think he has to come back here, right, Tom, for that?
It might impact the parking, we'll review Mr. Barnes.
We'll deal with that when it comes up.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not even sure I'm representing that applicant.
Okay. Okay. Call your first witness.
Mr. Regasio, please.
My apologies for butchering your name. You
So
wanna-
we just have to swear you in, so could you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, and could you please state your full name for the record?
Christopher Joseph Regasio. Christopher Joseph Regasio.
And your address?
53 Washington Street, Homestead, New Jersey.
It just records, it doesn't really amplify.
Continue.
Mr. Gracio, you represent the owners of the franchise that will be operating in your area? Yes. And can you give the board a little benefit of your background and your company?
The operating partner, Phil Nisbet is the investor on the group. This will be our 17th location that we're on in New Jersey. We just opened the grounds last week. I've been with Jersey Mike's Subs since 2011.
And what, and just explain, I believe everybody knows what it is, but what exactly the store is.
We sell submarine sandwiches, but slice, cold cut, make our bread, like all the, produce in the morning, then we go flat top grill, we do cheesesteak and, wrap.
And you also understand that, your employees will have to get the appropriate, training and licenses from the county,
Yes,
and you do that ordinarily in all of your stores?
yes.
I don't, from a food handler's perspective, I don't know what other issues you want to address.
Tom?
It's a fully conforming application, as we've heard. Are you planning on keeping any commercial vehicles on site for delivery?
No.
So that issue's taken care of. And as Mr. Carson mentioned, there's no issue with parking because the restaurant use is regulated by square footage and not seats as it normally would be. So, do you happen to know, just for the record, how many seats you're planning on having? I think about 20 or so.
I think it's a little less.
Less than that? Okay, so less than 20 seats. Not a seat-intensive use, so, conforming application. They're just here for the food handlers.
Mr. Esposito, do you have any questions? Mr. Gibbons? Mr. Bartoloni?
No.
Mr. Craig?
I have questions.
How do you know that?
Why, look at
Roughly what portion of your food is takeout versus eating?
On average, about 30% takeout, 35% takeout.
So it's roughly 70% consumed on premise?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I would have thought the other way
Yeah, me
around.
too.
Yeah.
Growing up with Uber Eats and DoorDash, that kind of stuff, we increased it, but it's mostly lunchtime business.
Explain to me what type of cooking you're going to be performing on premise.
Limited, very limited cooking. Most of our product is cold cut that's already cooked. The only thing we actually cook is roast beef. We trim, tie, cook in the oven every few days, and then we cook raw chicken and raw cheesesteak on the flat top grill.
Do you have any hoods?
Yes, we have one hood.
You have one hood. And it has an exhaust?
Yes,
What kind of filters do you have on an exhaust?
that's a good question. We have a company after there that does all that for us.
How often are those filters changed?
We clean them weekly, and they're serviced every quarter.
Every 3 months?
Yeah.
Wow. Not,
Your stuff like that?
yeah.
Yeah. we service them quickly.
All right. If we receive complaints of odors, we notify you, you agree to clean your filters on a more frequent,
Yeah, like I said, there's very limited cooking. There's no
I understand that, but 3 months seems like a lot.
Have you had any complaints from your other,
No, we
the other
clean
stores?
a long time. We don't complain.
Let me ask you this, are you cooking fish?
No fish.
Good, all right. I believe that's all the questions I have at this point.
Councilman? Ms. Boland? You took my questions away. I am good, and I will ask our engineer, our planner one more time. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up at this point?
Recommend you approve the application.
Okay, at this point, I'll entertain a motion on this application.
I'll make a motion, we accept the application for a food handler's license as presented.
Have a second?
Second.
Did you get the second?
Somebody did.
And we'll take a roll call, please.
Okay. Chairman Narafilian,
Yes.
Ms. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni,
Yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes.
Mr. Grasso,
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
We wish you nothing but the best of luck,
Yes.
and I look forward to a nice cheesesteak
Yeah,
here.
and
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see everyone.
When do you plan to open?
Mr. Esposito.
This is around, I don't know, like maybe June, July?
All right.
Awesome. Good luck.
Good luck.
Okay. our next application of the folks from 297 Wales Avenue.
Chairman,
the,
can you step out?
Mm-hmm. That is Lot 303, Lot 3. You sticking around, or we
I
still
am,
have
yeah.
that master plan?
Yes, I'm sitting around just moving through.
Good evening, sir, how are you?
Yes, again, I'm Frank Ferraro, attorney on behalf of the applicant, New Jersey North Property. Before, this is an application for a minor subdivision, for the property of 297 Wales Avenue, block 303, 3 in the R1 zone. Currently, the property consists of a 100 by 150 foot lot, which is 1,500 square feet in a zone which requires 7,500 square foot lot. What the applicant is looking to do is to subdivide the property into two separate 7,500 square foot lots, but conforming as the minimum lot area. However, each lot would be 50 by 150 in this area that requires 75 feet. We do have two experts for you, our engineer to review the subdivision plan, as well as our planner who did an analysis of this neighborhood to demonstrate just how many of the existing lots on this lot, or this area of Wales, are actually 50-foot wide lots. So the applicant believes that by subdividing the lots, we can create two brand new homes that will be more in character with the existing homes on this street and in this particular neighborhood. And like I said, our planner will share his analysis on it. Mr. Chairman, unless there's any initial questions.
Just Tom, anything to? Okay.
Thank you. Our professional engineer, Chris Montelmi, will testify to the subdivision plan.
And could you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you.
And could you please state your full name for the record?
Chris Lantown, I'm from Lantown Friends and Associates at 101 West Street in Woodtown.
Okay, and have you been before this board before?
I don't believe so, but most boards in Bergen County.
Okay. Can you just provide the board with a background on your education and experience?
I have degrees in civil engineering and also in land surveying. I've practiced land surveying in the state of New Jersey as a licensed surveyor for about 22 years. I've practiced engineering for about 35 years in New Jersey and other surrounding states. Like I mentioned, I probably testified in 80% of the boards in Bergen County and some of the surrounding counties.
Okay. Does the board accept?
It does.
Okay, thank you. So that's how the plans are about to present were either prepared by you or under your supervision, is that correct?
They were.
And the last revision date on this is January 2nd, 2020?
Sure.
So everybody should have that packet. So now, please just start by describing the existing conditions of the property.
Existing now is a 1.5-story single-family dwelling. The lot slopes from the back of the lot to the front, specifically the rear left corner down to the front right corner. About a 8 or 9 feet difference in elevation from the two extremes. The existing lot is 15,000 square feet in area. It's 100 feet wide and 150 feet deep. Proposed improvements would be 2 single-family dwellings. The one variance we are asking for would be the lot width, but the bulk requirements would all conform. There are some trees on the property that would have to be removed. Most of the trees are actually around the perimeter of the property, but there are 4 trees that, if you look at the plan, that land within the possible building envelope. 2 pine trees and 2 oak trees. But the other trees could possibly
far as drainage, there'd be a nice slope for the driveway to drain out to the street. And we'd be using seepage pits to catch the water from the roof. And, this is not, maybe some swales between the houses, but this is not a difficult site, to design for. It mostly flows out to the street, maybe a little bit to the right, but that can be. And, is it your opinion that the property can be developed, to be RSIS compliant with respect to parking?
Yes.
And, as you indicated, this is not an undersized lot, both lots will be 7,500 square feet in size, is that correct?
7,500 square feet inside, yes.
Okay. Just the lot width is the portion of the C variance?
Yes.
And, there was a comment, variance regarding the fact that there were no architecturals. We do have an exhibit, just to show the board, what the builder had in mind, what the property owner had in mind. Probably gonna look very familiar because it's from around the corner. There's a similar house that I think it's 794 6th Avenue, that was recently built. So, first of all, do you want me to mark the plan as A1? It's in the board's packet.
You could just mark the exhibit.
Okay, so we will mark the plan. So then I'll mark the photo as A1 and just pass on to the copy to give the board an idea.
That what I missed?
So this exhibit is on a 50 by 100 lot?
Correct, almost directly around the corner.
This is on a 50 by 100 lot.
50 by 100 is my understanding. Based upon a subdivision.
Just
Yeah,
a
that
point of
gives-
clarification, it's actually a 62.5.
It's a 62.5, yeah. It just came before us about
Yeah,
a year ago.
recently, correct.
So what you're showing us really doesn't really hold the metal to what you're proposing, because this is 12 feet wider. Is that correct?
It's that type of design with the garage forward, that was the point.
The photo that you're showing us,
Correct.
is that totally new construction?
Yeah, it is.
That one is new construction. One of the houses, I believe, was kept, and there was a new house built on the subdivided lot.
Is a lot in this diagram?
Yeah, it might show up.
I think that lot had one house in the middle, that 800 6th Avenue.
If it's not in that, we have another exhibit, the planner's gonna mark in, and it's definitely on there. So,
But it's not on this one?
it looks like it might just be outside of it, just outside the circle.
You just said it was around the corner, so.
It is. It is around the circle.
So by providing this picture, are you testifying that this house would fit on your lot with the side setbacks that are required by the borough?
That similar style house, as you indicated, would have to be.
I mean, I'm looking at a two-car garage. I mean, I just don't think you're gonna be able to fit a two-car garage and the rest of this house on a 50-foot lot.
That garage might have to be smaller, Mr. Chairman,
So
to your
then-
point. But it just gives the board an idea of the garage forward type design and the ability to create.
So then I think you wanna correct your testimony that this is not exactly the house that's, the way it's shaped is not gonna be the house that your client would be able to build, because you'd never fit a two-car garage on that property.
It's going to have to be modified to fit the property.
What's the lot width here?
Um,
On the photo?
62 and a half.
62 and a half.
Correct.
Wow.
And again, we know because they just came last year, so
Correct.
we have a good memory. All right, continue. Do you have anything else?
Just to summarize, we're obviously not looking for any variances other than the lot width at this particular time, correct?
That's right, that's right.
It is the developer's intention to build within the permitted building envelope? Yes.
So, I
And-
guess, I didn't mean to cut you off, I just wanted to ask you a question about it. So we're talking about neighborhood consistency. If you're a typical developer, you might max out the lot. What's the biggest house you could build on either of these two lots?
If you maxed out the footprint, for the building coverage, the footprint would be 1875.
That would be the footprint, so times two, so about 3,700 square foot house-ish
That would include.
on both lots.
Yeah.
And just, I don't want to throw out, and I got you, but with respect to the side yard requirements, you'd be able to build essentially a 32-foot wide house, because you'd have 7.5 on one side and 11.5 on another. Gives you a 32-foot width house, and whatever depth that would be, and 3,700 square feet. That's kind of the building envelope that would be.
Okay. Is that it, Tom?
There's one comment in the letter about the, to address the stream, down the street, being with the dead end of Wales Avenue. We are far enough away from that stream and elevated enough that the mountain repairing zone, flood zone, really has no effect on this.
Well, I think the comment was less to do with the stream and flooding and more to do with whether or not any stormwater was, I know there's no building proposed per se, but whether or not that was conceptually part of the plan at this point.
To use the stream as a,
No, if there's going to be any on-site stormwater.
yeah, just the procedures that I mentioned earlier. Mr. Montgomery, in your professional opinion, can the subdivided lots accommodate the new homes that we're proposing? Yes, but there's room to put a house on 55, especially with this.
Tom, do you have any other questions?
Not at this point for the engineer.
So I'll move to my left, Councilman.
Come back to me.
I'll come back to you, sure. Ms. Boland, I'm sure that you have a few questions.
Well, I have a concern about the list that was given to you by the town for noticing. Only because I was checking to see who lived nearby, and it seems like one of the closest lots is not on the list that was given to you.
By law, the applicant, all they can do is rely on the list that's given to them by the town.
So I don't know
We're
if that's
obviously
an
not
issue.
trying to miss anybody, but that's the official list. And that's the notice we provide.
If the town tax collector provided the list.
Right, no, I understand that, I agree with that, there is a house, there is a lot right next to it that is not noticed. That's something we should be aware of, that's all. As far as the size of the lot, I do think that it's consistent with the adjacent lot. So I don't take issue with the proposed subdivision.
Secretary?
As far as the variance, I think it's a large variance you're looking for. I mean, it's not like the width is short by 2 or 3 feet, or 5 feet or something like that. It's a substantial variance. My opinion, the zoning ordinances were formed and the minimum width requirements per lot of the town with good reason. I don't think this is just a slight adjustment. I mean, I drove down 6th Avenue and there's a couple homes on 6th Avenue. I know part of your explanation of, why it should be allowed to be done is it would be in character with the neighborhood, but there's a few houses on 6th. I think one on the northwest corner of 6th and Webb, which is on a large lot. I think that's the address. And there's another one on 6th that are on large lots. And there's houses nearby that are on smaller lots, and it doesn't look obtrusive to me at all. It makes the neighborhood look nice. So,
In this case, the lot, if you build a very large lot, build a house on that lot, it's going to have a lot width that's 25% over what's required. So
right, like existing. I mean, that's
correct. The applicant just believes that when you drive down Wales and you see how many 50-foot wide lots, it's a considerable amount. He will testify to it. I think it's something like the 21 lots that actually front on Wales between think it's Fifth and Seventh, and 16 of them are, or roughly 16 of them, I'll give you the exact number, are 50 feet wide. So that's why we're presenting to the board that this might not be an appropriate variance for every location, but it's particularly suited in this location just because of the vast majority of homes along Wales are already 50-foot wide lots. So that's why we think the board can potentially look upon this variance without any detriment to the neighborhood. In fact, by granting the variance, we feel it would be more in character with the neighborhood, and consistently with those street frontages as you move through this particular neighborhood. But once again, Mr. Carl Bax, our planner, he's got an exhibit for you that will visually show, what I just explained.
I would be more inclined to agree. I mean, if this was a structure that you were looking for a variance because the structure had been damaged or burned and you were looking to replace, something, and it was the lot was somehow needed a variance. That's all I have to say.
We'll go right into the fire there, Mr. Zito.
I'm inclined to look at this piece of land, and I know you want to divide it and make two places, but I think if we have this size property, I think we can get one building on that and not continue to cut them in half and make smaller. So that's the only thing I'm thinking right now is, I know there are a lot of places like this, but why shouldn't you continue this? Because then you bring more kids in, I'm thinking about going to school and so forth. I'm not sure how the driveway's going to make out, and you have places for park inside or on the curb. I don't know that. So this is just my observation in the last couple of minutes. What I would say at this point.
Mr. Bartoloni?
I don't have any questions for the engineer, but I would hold for the...
Yeah, sure. Mr. Kessler?
Same here.
I have,
Right.
yeah, I have a couple questions. You mentioned that, the 50-foot lots are, representative of the neighborhood. Okay? As I look at the lot you're talking about, and I look at the contiguous lots next to it, lot number 2 is 50 foot wide, I'm assuming from this drawing. Lot number 24 is significantly wider than 50 foot. It probably looks like it's close to 100. Lot number 6 is more than 50 foot wide. Lot number 5 is more than 50 foot wide. Lot number 4 is more than 50 foot wide. Across the street, lot number 13 is wider than 50 foot wide. You have more lots that are wider than 50 foot contiguous to this property than are 50 foot. So it's really not accurate to say that it's in the nature of that neighborhood, because in that immediate neighborhood there are very few lots that are, again, contiguous to that are 50 foot. Most of them are conforming as far as the width goes.
I'll leave it to our planner to testify to that, but to your point, a lot of the lots that you mentioned, they're corner lots, so they tend to be a little larger lots. This is an interior lot that we're trying to subdivide, and most of the interior lots you're going to see along Wales are actually 50 feet, and a couple of lots like 4 and 5, I believe those lots actually, they front on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
But they don't front on Wales. So when we're talking about the character of the neighborhood, we're talking about driving down Wales, the houses you see, looking across the street from one another, that you're not proposing something that someone's going to look across the street and say, oh my God, that's something that I don't see every day outside my window.
Well, it's also a question of the amount of house versus the amount of property and the feel that has in the neighborhood. And the 4 houses that are right adjacent to that house contribute to that. So to say that they're not part of that visual neighborhood is not accurate.
You can look at it either way, right, Mr. Cook? Depending on, where you divide those lines. But I think the next exhibit will be.
Okay.
Might be.
The other thing, I don't know if this is a question for the planner or for the engineer, but I guess I'd like to hear some thoughts on the fact that taking a conforming lot and splitting it into one or more non-conforming lots is specifically prohibited in our code. Makes me curious as to, characterizing it as a minor variance, and B, justifying it. I mean, I know there are 50-foot lots here. Those, as an engineer, or as a planner noted in his notes, those 50-foot lots existed at the time that code was put into effect. So they understood that there were neighborhoods that had 50-foot lots. And we still created a code that says you cannot subdivide a conforming lot into a non-conforming lot. Okay, it's not a minor variance. So I guess I want to hear thoughts on the justification of doing that when the code specifically prohibits it.
I mean, there's a certain density that is contemplated by the ordinance. You have an R1 zone that requires 7,500 square foot. So for every 7,500 square feet of lot area, you would assume there would be one dwelling in there. This particular lot has 15,000 square feet, which is exactly the square footage, density-wise, the ordinance would contemplate 2 homes there. The only difference is in this particular neighborhood, because this neighborhood, the way the lots were made way back when, they have a lot of lot depth and not as much lot width. I mean, you have 150-foot lot depth in a zone that only requires, the lot depth is 100. So that is a significant difference in what the ordinance would require. So density-wise, the ordinance would say there should be 2 homes on a 15,000 square foot lot in this particular zone. The only way we can actually meet the ordinance's density expectation in this particular neighborhood is by requesting the lot width variance. And while we think it's justified in this case, it's just because of the number of 50-foot by 150 lots you have in this particular area. We've asked the board to look at this and say, is this something that's going to substantially impact, or detriment the surrounding neighborhood? And I think when you drive down Wales, and what you're going to see and hear from our planner, you can see that there are special circumstances here where it might justify the granting of that particular variance.
But I think the code doesn't require that you show it doesn't damage. The code says you have to show a public good.
Correct.
So which are 2 different things.
Correct. And, I mean, the master plan, I think this was noted in Mr. Barron's letter, it indicates that the 1984 master plan sets forth the goal of maintaining the character and viability of all established residential neighborhoods. This is an established residential neighborhood. I think by actually granting the variance and allowing us to make this two 50-foot lots, which match most of the lots along Wales, you're actually furthering the goals of the master plan, which is to maintain the character and viability of established residential neighborhoods. This is going to be, otherwise it's going to be, a 100-foot lot. It's going to be considerably bigger than a lot of the lots on the street. You're going to have a house that's much larger next to houses that are essentially, a lot of them are 50-foot wide. But I'd rather rely on Mr. Carlbeck's exhibit.
Yeah, I think
we
most of our questions are probably going to be, are you okay? We'll go to the planner? We'll go to the planner.
Go to the planner, because basically what I'm going to say is repetitious.
But before we go to the planner, I'm going to ask, I'm sorry, Councilman?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I asked you to...
Yeah, sure, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Before we get to the planner, you just kept saying it meets the ordinance's density expectation, right?
Correct.
But it meets the ordinance's maximum density expectation, right?
Well, I don't think there's a maximum or minimum. I think there's just a square footage requirement.
Well, no, there is maximum and minimum. That's why we're here today, because you're asking us for a variance. But we're talking about the density expectation. It's the maximum density expectation, because it makes a difference. I'll let you think on that for a second, all right? I do have a little bit of an issue, because when I first read this application earlier today and I poured over it, I saw, minor, minor, minor. But when you do the math, you're asking for a 33 1/3% reduction. Is that correct? It's not roughly one-third, right? It's one-third. It's one-third reduction. That's not minor. I mean, if I were to take one-third of your salary, you wouldn't think that was minor, right? No, I do understand. I understand. But, you know, I have an issue with this minor, because it's like you're trying to mislead us into thinking it's minor, but it's not minor. This is quite a sizable reduction that we're talking about.
I'm never trying to mislead anyone.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying that the language, the verbiage used.
Councilman, the statute, the ordinance defines this particular variance request as a minor subdivision, just because it's dividing one lot into two, not two or more would be a major
I
subdivision.
think he's talking impact. You're
Right.
talking impact,
I am.
not subdivision.
But that being said, I wasn't thinking that you were misleading us, at least not purposefully. I'm just saying that when it was presented to me, I thought one thing, and then when I started digging into it, it seemed to me something very different.
I'm just thinking we're gonna go through this again with the planner,
Okay.
so,
If I could just respond just really briefly, Mr. Chairman, just to the councilman's
are you gonna
point.
give one-third of your salary up?
But
That was
my point,
unfair. I apologize.
I understand the analogy. My point, though, is, you know, what I would say to this, because the reason why I use the word minor, because you did 33%, if you look at the lot width, that's correct. What we're saying is, even with that, it still blends in with this neighborhood. Plus, your lot width is 33% deeper than what the ordinance requires. So there's a give and take there, which is unique to this neighborhood. So that's why I think a lot width variance can be considered, because you have this 33% bonus of lot depth.
I think I agree with you, the give and take, but the only thing is, if someone's driving through the neighborhood and getting a feel for the neighborhood, the fact that the lot is 33% narrower is gonna be much more noticeable than the fact that it's 33% deeper. No one's gonna notice that as extra depth, but driving by, it's gonna be very obvious it's narrower
But
than it
all
was.
the houses are similar, then it's not out of character with the neighborhood. But most of the lots.
Just
Again,
one-
this is-
One more
Go ahead.
comment, just because I need to understand.
Uh,
Is this to scale? Are these exactly, is 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 exactly the same size as 1, 2, 5, 4, 3 on this map, or are we?
It's a tax map, so.
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah,
The ones that
okay.
All right, so, ask for a motion open to the public just for this particular witness.
May, so may.
What, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstained? Okay, this is the opportunity for, you guys can sit, by the way, you don't need to stand.
I drove down from Vermont, I got back about 2 hours ago, I'm standing.
Does anybody, the Honorable John Felice. Good evening, sir.
How are you?
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
I'll be happy to do so. My name is John A. Police, 39 Wales, River Edge, New Jersey. I'm here to comment on the subdivision of 297 Wales Avenue. Before I do that, I'd like to thank everybody for their service to the community. As planning board members, I've been there, done that.
Former.
And,
Right here.
So thank you very much. Thank you, councilors, for being here as well, representing your client. I would like to comment on the subdivision. I appreciate the fact that these gentlemen are willing to buy this property and subdivide, but I believe it would be a detriment to the community. I've lived on 309 Wales Avenue for 28 years.
And for the record, that's located on the corner of Wales and Sixth, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe that, and I've been seeing some subdivisions take place next to my property, and certainly they've come to the board and asked for a variance, and they've received it, but in no means was it a subdivision to 50 feet wide. I believe that now, when this change of the width that was taken was a number of years ago for obvious reasons, because of the density consequences and the results of that in the community. I kind of believe that, or I do believe that if you were to subdivide it 50 feet wide, I think it would be a detriment to the community. The example that the councilor just showed was actually 62 feet wide. So we have to be careful about the concept of what this house will look like in 62 feet wide, the reality of what it would be in a 50 foot wide. So I'm representing some of my neighbors, actually, Mr.
I
Rocco.
have to check.
Let me, this is a...
Just as a point of order,
Well,
and I think
Sir?
Council's gonna say
Could you please let the,
that's fine. It's public
just
comment,
state your
but-
objection?
well, if he's not an attorney, he can't represent somebody before the board,
Well-
neighbors before his board, or twelve.
You can only speak for yourself here.
That would be great.
Okay.
I'll speak for can I speak for my wife? If that's possible. Can I do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. She's been
Fred said yes, so he's in trouble.
I respectfully disagree with that, but that's okay.
Mike speaks for all the
It's
time,
that
so-
I believe that many, including, I'll just speak for myself, that I think it would be a detriment to the community, and to the neighborhood, and to Wales Avenue if this was subdivided to 50 feet wide. So, that's my opinion. I'm a longstanding resident of River Edge, and I believe that we really need to keep to the ordinances that have been put in place. And I would kindly ask the board members to take my recommendation to deny this application to subdivide to 50 feet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I have a question for Mr.
Yes.
Felice? Being that you live next door to the properties that were subdivided,
Right.
I just have, was there a negative impact on your property because of that?
No.
Okay.
But there was a number of times when one has to keep on top of the contractors to make sure that things are done appropriately, because, you know, they're under timetables, they're under, cost restraints to get things done in quick fashion. So, whenever construction is performed within a neighborhood, there are impacts placed upon their neighbors. Whether it's runoff, or whether it's noise, whether it's trucks starting before they're supposed to start. And thank you, River Edge Police, for enforcing the noise ordinance and starting work ordinance at a certain time. So I don't deny anyone the chance to rebuild a home or rehab a home. I mean, that's their prerogative and that's their right. But certainly, we want to make sure that the additions that are done and subdivisions that are done are within code. And as I mentioned before, Mr. Chairman, I'm very concerned about the subdivision that from 100 to 50. I would kindly ask the board to consider my request, and I'm not going to speak about any other neighbors, but I'm sure that they would be very happy as well. Hopefully I didn't cross the line, council.
Thank you, Mr. Felice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, if that's it for this witness, we'll call the next witness.
Yes, the next witness is our professional planner, David Corlgar. And I'm just gonna take this opportunity just to mark Mr. Lanford's plan at D2. This is the minor subdivision plan which he testified to.
Good evening, sir, welcome.
Could you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And could you please state your full name for the record?
Yes, my name is David Carlback, Karlebach.
All right, and have you ever presented before this board before?
I don't believe so.
Okay, could you just provide the board with your background and education, please?
Certainly. I have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and I have been for 26 years. I've previously qualified and testified before planning boards and boards of adjustment throughout the state. I've also qualified and testified as an expert planning witness in federal court and superior court.
You, any towns in Bergen County?
Probably most towns in Bergen County. I think there's 70 in Bergen County, so I'm going to say probably 45 to 50 in Bergen County.
I would say we're good.
Okay. Thank you. So Mr. Carlback, have you performed a planning analysis of the subject application?
Yes, I have.
And could you please review some of the materials that you looked at in preparation for your testimony?
Well, I reviewed the application materials, including the subdivision plat. I reviewed the municipal zoning ordinance, master plan reexamination report of 2009. I have visited the site and the surrounding areas, and I prepared a planning exhibit which shows the lot sizes and lot configurations of all lots within 500 feet of the subject property.
I'll mark that A3 for the record.
What is the document?
It's, I'm just gonna pull a tax map exhibit.
And you indicated this was prepared by you, Mr. Farva?
I personally prepared this exhibit. And as that's being passed around, I'll just describe what the purpose of the exhibit is. These are actually just tax map sheets that are pieced together to show all the properties within 500 feet of the subject property. The lots that have 50-foot in lot width have been shaded in yellow. So you can see within 500 feet of this site, there are exactly 75 lots that have lot widths of 50 feet. And that represents 62% of all the lots that I'm going to pull within that study area. So the majority of lots have widths of 50 feet. And as a matter of fact, if you look to the north of Wales, those lots that are 50 feet wide do not have 150-foot lot depths. So they don't even achieve the 7,500 square foot lot area. They're deficient with respect to both lot area and lot width. Okay, so this proposed, or I say these proposed two lots, while they may be deficient in terms of lot width, number one, I think they match the prevailing lot width in the neighborhood, and number two, they do achieve the minimum lot area. So that's what makes it significant. I know there was mention about the two lots adjoining them, lots number 4 and 5, which adjoin to the east, and it was mentioned that those lots have width of 75 feet, but if you look, those lots also have lot areas of 7,500 square feet, the same lot area as the proposed two lots. Okay, so lots 4, 5, 1, and 2, those are, contiguous in the same lot, fronting on Wales, all have 7,500 square foot lot areas. But I'll let the exhibit speak for itself. You can see a great deal of it is shaded in yellow. That means the majority of these lots are 50-foot lot width. That's the prevailing lot width in this neighborhood, not 75 feet. It just, the 75-foot lot width hasn't manifested itself in this neighborhood. Now, this subdivision occurred right around the early 1940s. Some of the homes have been upgraded. They have new siding, new windows, but these are still older homes on older lots. I guess at some point, yes, the zoning ordinance was changed, but in changing the ordinance, what you did, one of the byproducts was you created all of these non-conforming lots. So that's what we're left with here. Now, in terms of the planning groups, the granting of the C variance, as the board members know, but maybe the new board member may not know, there's different types of C variances. C1 variance is where hardship must be shown. A C2 variance, or what planners call a flexible C variance, is different. That's more of a benefits versus burdens test. And when I say that, I mean that it's really a different set of proof entirely. What the applicant must show is that the variance relates to a specific piece of property, that is, what distinguishes this property from other properties in the zone, and of course the distinguishing feature here is it's twice as big as the required minimum lot area. And then the applicant must show that it advances the purposes of the municipal land use law, and that it satisfies both prongs of the negative criteria. That is, no substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and no substantial detriment to the public good. The Supreme Court in Kaufman versus the Planning Board for Warren Township made clear that the test to be applied by the local agency, that's you, in considering a variance application under this section is whether the grant of the approval will actually benefit the community and that it represents a better zoning alternative for the property. So the focus on the C2 case is not on the characteristics of the land that, in light of the current zoning requirements, create a hardship warranting that relaxation of the standards, but on the characteristics of the land that present an opportunity for better planning and zoning that will benefit the community. So that, in essence, is the C2 case.
As a matter of fact, that's the Kaufman versus Warren Township Planning Board is a 1988 case. It was the first time that the New Jersey Supreme Court considered the C2 variance, and it was an application very similar to this, where an applicant was able to achieve the minimum lot area requirement, but could not meet the minimum lot width requirement. I believe in that case, the minimum lot width was 100 feet, and the applicant subdivided the parcel to have 2 lots with equal lot widths of 83.74 feet. So very similar circumstances to what we have here today. And I believe this application does advance important purposes of the municipal land use law. One, I guess the most significant purpose of the land use law as it pertains to this application is to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. So the benefits of zoning, which would be more harmonious lot sizes, could be seen as substantially outweighing any detriment, given that the establishment of appropriate population densities is a recognized purpose of zoning. The grant of this variance to permit the property to be subdivided into 2 lots consistent with the prevailing lot areas in the neighborhood advances that statutory objective. This proposal is both consistent and compatible with the established pattern of residential development. The vast majority of homes are situated on 50-foot wide lots. And as I said, 75 of these lots within the study area have 50-foot lot widths. And many of those lots, as I stated, are also non-conforming with respect to lot area. In terms of the negative criteria, I don't believe there's any substantial detriment to the public good. This proposal creates lot sizes that are similar in area and proportion to the neighborhood. And the creation of uniformly sized lots reinforces neighborhood pattern with respect to building massing. An exceptionally large building could occur on this lot as it stands today. And that is discouraged. We want to keep that consistency, that uniformity. We want to keep that rhythm or repetition of massing in the area. The applicant seeks no other variances at this time. There are no proposed encroachments caused by pools, decks, or anything like that. Simply due to the lot width variance. Any perceived detriment does not rise to the level of substantial. And I want to remind board members of that. That is the test. Substantial. Every variance application accompanies with it some sort of detriment. That's the presumption. There's got to be some detriment if it's adverse to the zoning ordinance. But the statute tells us that detriment must be substantial. And quite frankly, board members, I don't see a substantial detriment. I don't believe there's any substantial impairment of the zoning ordinance. The proposal is consistent and compatible with the 7,500 square foot minimum lot area and the implied density for the zone. The implied density for the zone, 5.8 dwelling units per acre. The proposal is for 5.8 dwelling units per acre. The creation of more harmonious lot sizes allows building massing and setbacks consistent with the neighborhood pattern. These lots are well proportioned and they can accommodate homes of reasonable sizes, all within the allowable building envelope. The vast majority of lots in this R1 zone are non-conforming with respect to lot width. The diminished lot width does not cause damage to the integrity of the zone. So the conclusion, which would be the balancing, is that the benefits to be derived here are harmonious lot sizes, the creation of building envelopes which yield homes with sizes comparable with the neighborhood homes, and that's of course beneficial to the community. Board members, I see no detriments. So I'm going to suggest to this board that the planning benefits outweigh any perceived detriment, and I believe this board should feel very comfortable in granting these lot width variances.
No direct questions, Mr. Carlback. The board has any questions?
Tom?
I do have a few questions. Mr. Carlback, thank you for your testimony. You had mentioned that there would be no impacts or detriments. Would it be your opinion that having two houses versus one house would not create any additional impacts in terms of the number of bedrooms or vehicle traffic? So for instance, instead of having one four-bedroom house, you could have the potential of having two four-bedrooms.
No, because it's consistent with the implied density, 5.8 dwelling units per acre. That's exactly what the ordinance envisions.
It's consistent with the density when the bulk parameters are met and does not
The bulk
produce an
parameters,
impact.
the bulk
No,
parameters are met.
but you're here for a lot with variance, are you not?
Right.
So you haven't met parameters.
I don't understand what the,
You've met some of the zoning criteria, you haven't met all the zoning criteria.
I don't understand.
As the councilman mentioned before, as was mentioned before, there's a maximum density that's been established. You're able to build a home on the property as it exists today. You are able to build a home on a 7,500 square foot lot, provided that you have a lot width of 75 feet. You don't have that, you're asking for a variance for that.
I don't see the relationship between, I'm sorry if I fail to understand the question, but I think you're somehow tying in the activity on the site and the amount of traffic generated with the lot width. And I just don't see it that way. I associate activity, okay, and intensity of development with density, not with lot width. I just don't make that association.
Well, correct, and you're proposing to develop two houses with a variance, where without a variance, you can build one house. You have twice the number of bedrooms, twice the amount of vehicular traffic. Is that
I'm
on the
afraid we're going to have to agree to disagree. The intensity of land use in a residential setting is measured in density. And my contention here, my planning argument, is that this density is equal to the implied density for the zone.
Are you a licensed traffic expert as well?
I don't need to be a traffic expert to tell you.
No.
No, I'm not.
So your testimony really can't answer my planner's question, which is, will it create more, the increased cars, will it increase more traffic? You're not able to answer that question, even though you seem to try to.
Well, the planner is also testifying to the fact that it might.
He's not testifying, he asked a question. He asked a question, he's not testifying. He asked a question, and your planner went back at him and didn't really answer the question because he couldn't understand the question. So I'm asking the question, will there be increased, if you have two houses, would you have an increased amount of cars on the property?
I want to answer the question this way.
No, it's a simple question. You don't have to answer it any other way.
Yeah.
Will there be increased cars on the property if you build two houses versus one?
Well, of course.
Okay, so then you don't have to put it any other way then, do you?
Well, I do, because I don't think it's that simple. I think we're really oversimplifying it.
Well, in your case, in your idea we are, but it might not be the board's idea that we are. So I think you should just answer the questions directly instead of going back at the planner and tell him you can't understand the question. If you can't understand the question, Mr. Behrens will rephrase it. But I don't think you need to go back to him and just throw your shoulders up like that. So, Mr. Behrens, do you have any other questions?
A few more. Another comment that was raised, the house itself was built in 1942. The latest I could go back in the zoning was about 1973, since which the borough has had this 75-foot minimum lot width provision. And in all that time, about 50 years, it had the opportunity to recognize how its town has been developed and to change that if it so wanted to. And in fact, it did create relief for non-conforming lots, recognizing that much of the town does have 50-foot and 60-foot wide lot width. So they recognize that. We do know our own town, and so the zoning has been altered to reflect that. And throughout all that time, the borough has maintained the minimum lot width of 75 feet, as far as I'm aware, purposefully. And I think that addresses at least that comment that you've made so far. Now, part of your testimony is that the lot width would be in character with the neighborhood that has some number of 50-foot wide lot widths. As was discussed with the applicant's engineer, you could max out the lot and build 3,700 square foot houses. Would that be in character with the developed condition of that particular area of the borough? Have you done that analysis?
Well, I think the presumption is that if you're operating within the parameters of the ordinance, if it doesn't require any other variances relative to setbacks or building height, then of course, the presumption is, yes, that it is in character.
So just so I understand your statement, the 3,700 square foot houses that could be built there are in character with the existing development pattern on Wales Avenue as it exists today?
I think
Based on your analysis of that?
my analysis is this. This is not Levittown. We don't hope to achieve all 2,000 square foot homes just because the neighborhood has 2,000 square foot homes. Okay, we understand, we recognize that people have different requirements today than they did back in the 1950s. In the 1950s, it wasn't unusual for three brothers to share one bedroom and for the entire family to share one bathroom. And that's why we had 1,800 square foot homes back in 1942. But we live differently today. We're not building, no builders are building 1,800 square foot homes. It just doesn't happen. I can tell you that as a matter of experience. So, we look at it this way. What would we rather have? Homes on a 50-foot wide lot, or the potential for a much, much larger home on a 150-foot wide lot, or a 100-foot wide lot, I should say. I think the potential for a large home inconsistent with the smaller homes in the neighborhood is much greater the way the property exists today.
So is your position that having one large house is better than having two large houses?
No.
On those two lots?
No.
Back here.
One thing, if I may.
Yeah.
I just have a question, because I believe the subdivision map that Mr. Lentell testified to shows the building envelope based upon the setback
And
requirement.
I think technically the setbacks are incorrect, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think on one side it has 7.5, the other side's supposed to be 11.5, so I'm not sure that's accurate.
Okay, but that aside, we'd still be constrained by the lot coverage requirements in the zone. So conceivably, you wouldn't be able to build a house, argument's sake, let's say the setback line is correct on this plan. You wouldn't necessarily be able to build a house with the perimeter of that house on the dashed line shown on these particular lots, because you're gonna have a driveway, you're gonna have a walkway, you're gonna have a back deck or a patio. All those things are gonna feed into your allowable lot coverage, which are in turn gonna shrink the footprint of the house and the square footage of the house. So if this subdivision were granted, it's very likely that a house that large may not be constructed, or you'd have to be back before this board testing for variances, which I don't think
The reality
client would
is,
want to do.
the reality is, we don't have the plan before us, so that's all speculative. We don't know what you're planning, we don't know if you would come back for variance.
Just, and I'm sorry, just for a matter of clarification, you said we're not Levittown, is it? I'm not sure what you meant by that.
In other words, I don't think it's necessary to build homes of similar sizes, similar setbacks. In other words, you don't want a cookie cutter pattern of homes. So what I'm saying is, it's not necessary to.
So, I'm just trying, excuse me, I got it. Wait.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what
The Levittown
the
reference?
Levittown reference means.
All right. Oh, yeah.
And you're on the record, so I wanted explained.
So in other words, we don't anticipate that we're going to have smaller homes built on these lots. They're not going to be 2,000 square foot homes similar to other homes in the neighborhood. We're not going to equal.
Are you stating that a town called Levittown has small homes located on it?
Right, that they all look the same, correct.
Okay.
Right.
When they
I'm
were
sorry,
built.
I misunderstood entirely. Right, what I meant was you're not gonna have that cookie cutter approach where every home mimics the home next to it and the home behind it, yeah.
Tom, are you done?
We go back to establish neighborhood character. Does it matter that this house has been there since day one in that neighborhood and has existed the same way as it has since 1942? Wouldn't that be part of the established neighborhood character and fabric of that block?
Well, we know neighborhoods change all the time. That's the dynamics of land development. Things change, they're continuously changing. And homes get to be a certain age, and they're either improved, or they're knocked down, they're replaced. Sometimes it's larger homes, so on and so forth. So what's the best thing you can do as a planner to ensure that, that pattern, that rhythm that we're looking for? And, the one thing we could do is just make sure we have similar lot sizes, so that to some degree ensures us that we're not going to have this disjointed neighborhood where larger homes are dwarfing these smaller homes.
So is your testimony telling me that anybody that comes before this board with a 100-foot lot that has 150 square foot in the back, or 150 foot in the back, to equal that 7,500 floor area ratio, that we should give them automatic approval because you say that's what we should do?
Well, I don't think...
But that was his testimony.
No, I think the testimony, if we get back to the original testimony, Mr. Chairman, and all due respect, I think the testimony was largely based off the exhibit, which demonstrates the fact.
But I
that there are a lot
count,
of 50
I
foot
count 500 or
wide-
600 foot lots there. Are you telling me that those people shouldn't have those lots? They should subdivide, all come in here, and we should grant all 5 or 6 of the 100 foot by 150 foot lots that are on your map here and give them a subdivision? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying if the lots are 2 times the required lot area in the zone, I think the board should certainly consider allowing a subdivision of lots that are equal to the minimum lot area in the zone. They should consider it.
I'm going to go to, Tom, are you done for now? We'll come back to you,
Question,
okay?
How does that impact light, air, and open space, which is the purpose of the municipal land use law? Shrinking down the minimum lot width of 75 feet to 15 feet, you have, now instead of 1 house within that parameter, you have 2 houses in that same space. Is that not an impact to light, air, and open space? And to the neighbors?
I think if you were to maintain the required setbacks and maintain the maximum permitted building height, I don't think you would have an issue with light, air, and open space.
Tom, could you just, real quick, just to, do you know when the ordinance, the most recent ordinance, as far as the 75-foot frontage was put in place in the borough?
I did go back as far as I could of what was available. The 75-foot has been in place since at least, I think it's 1973 or 1975. More recently, the borough recognized that it had, there was a non-conforming lot situation, so I think as early as 1986, with subsequent amendments, the borough gave relief to undersized lots, recognizing that they couldn't keep the same side yard.
But I do remember an ordinance passed recently, recently, I say within the last
I did do
15, 20
research.
years.
I looked there, I don't know what that's, I know it was mentioned at the last subdivision, I don't know what that was. I know the concern at the time, similar to the concerns that we're talking about tonight, albeit a bigger lot. One of the concerns the borough's had in general, which was mentioned in its master plan documents, has to do with overbuilding and overcrowding and additional bedrooms and burdens to the community, not the community, the school system. I mean, those are just recurring themes that have come up in the planning documents as of the last several decades.
Councilman Caningo.
Has any thought been given to the environmental impact of subdividing this into 2 lots with 2 houses?
Environmental impacts such as?
Do you not understand environmental?
We're not aware of any environmental issues with the property.
Okay, so you're going to be taking down trees, right?
I think the testimony was potentially 4, but they could be replaced.
What about the impact on the schools? How would this affect the schools possibly?
I mean, there's a possibility that, it'll generate additional school children, and they'll probably enter the public school system. And, of course, the new property owners are going to contribute money in the way of property taxes, a portion of which is going to fund public education.
I just want to make a comment that since this is a subdivision application, we can only consider the lot, the width, the area, the neighborhood. Although the applicant has presented possibilities of what is going to be on the lot, we don't know, we can't consider that at this time, just so everyone's aware.
Earlier, Council, I thought you had said you had given us a square footage of what the home might be.
The engineer did.
Okay, do you recall what that is? I didn't write it down, I'm not trying to trick you, I just don't remember.
I think it was based upon the buildable footprint as shown on the plan.
It was a maximum that was calculated,
Maximum.
When was that?
1975.
For the footprint of
For the footprint.
Well, 25% of 7,500. That's the footprint. And then times 2 would give you the square footage of the house. 36, 37, whatever.
I don't have anything else at this time.
Ms. Boland?
No comments yet.
I had a few comments. You mentioned earlier the Kaufman case that you were using, I guess, as a precedent. I mean, that seems to, this varies substantially from that, because, I mean, if that was something where a 100-foot width was required and they had 83, it was deficient by 17%, where this is deficient by 30-something percent, so it's substantially different. When I'm looking on this tax map, and you mentioned you have shaded in yellow all the properties which have a 50-foot width. If you were to drive through the area and you traveled east, most of those directly to the east are in white. So as far as the character of the neighborhood, I'm looking at lot number 1, lot number 9, lot number 8, number 7, 6. These are all in white. These are not in yellow.
Mr. Gressel, why don't you look across the street?
I'm just saying, the way it was represented, it was like the entire area was 50-foot lot. So to someone that hadn't seen the map, they would assume they'd look at the subject property and everything around it would be yellow. That's not the case. I look at everything to this side, pretty much as white.
Understood, but you're specifically looking to the east of 6th Avenue to find the property, correct? You're not looking between 6th and 7th.
Well, I mean, who's to say that, you know, we're not supposed to look at what's going on there, we're just going to look at here because that's going to be beneficial to our case?
You can look at anything you want. My point is, we're looking this way because we don't want
Right.
to look this way. I'm just counting. I'm not a planner, I'm not an engineer. I'm just looking at Exhibit A3. You know, on the north side of Wales Avenue, in between 7th and 6th Avenue, where this subject property is located, I'm counting 10 of the 12 lots on that side of the street, which
Right.
this property would face are 50-foot lots. And I'm looking at the south side of Wales Avenue, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 lots, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are 50-foot lots. If this subdivision were granted, then there'd be 7 out of 10 lots on the south side of Wales that are 50-foot lots. So our point is, not to tell you don't look elsewhere, but the point is, and this is why we represent the application the way we did, is that this is a unique neighborhood which we think can absorb this variance without creating something that's going to look out of character. Now, will there be additional cars? Yes, if one property can park 2 cars, now you're probably going to have 4 cars. If you subdivide it, if one house was going to have 2 children, now you have 2 lots, or maybe you have 4 children, or 4 to 6, however many people choose to have. So is there an impact? Yes, there could be, but the question is, Mr. Kralback stated, is it a substantial detriment? That's the test. Not whether there's a measurable impact, whether it's a substantial one. And that's why we believe that this application has merit, that the fact that there may be, if there is a detriment, it's going to be minimal to the neighborhood, which we feel this development is consistent with.
As I understand, I think Tom mentioned earlier, the total width of the left side yard and the right side yard has to be 17 feet?
It's 18.
18 feet. So that means remaining for the building is 32 feet.
Roughly, there is an ordinance provision, I guess, of 50-foot lots.
I was wrong in my memo, that's for existing non-conforming lots, so it wouldn't apply.
So then that would be accurate, as far as what the building width would be demanded to satisfy.
32 feet. I mean, as the gentleman here testified, I mean, you had mentioned no one's building 1,700 square foot houses, no builder anymore. It's not viable. So for a house that's theoretically, you had mentioned the square footage of the house is possibly in the 3,000 square foot range. Max. Some house like that, could we assume that a house of that size, it would be the norm to have a two-car garage?
I think it was more along the line of, probably more along the line of RSIS requirements where you have one garage and then you have a parking space behind it. But that would all have to be developed within the parameters of footprint if it was subdivided. Otherwise, we'd be back before you asking for variances.
Which is a common thing, by the way.
I'm sure it is.
Build the
I'm sure
houses,
it is.
they max out the FAR, and then they come back for relief. The people that own it realize there's no deck, there's no two-car driveway, and they come back. And we've actually put together a committee to study that, because we know it's an inherited problem in this town.
Mr. Chairman, my client has been in the business for decades. I mean, he saw the review letter, he saw the recommendation that when you go to design a house on these lots, make sure that you allot for a patio, a walkway, things that people are going to want in a new house, so they don't buy the house and then have to come back before the board.
I just think what would happen in the end, if this happened and it was developed, you'd have a lot that's 50 foot wide. Most buyers in this day and age are going to want a two-car garage. So if you have a two-car garage and you have a two-car wide driveway, which you possibly could obtain without a variance because you have the extra depth. So you could possibly have the two-car wide driveway and not go over the lot coverage. And then driving by the house, it would look rather peculiar, having a 50-foot wide lot with a two-car wide driveway. You have very little green space on the front lawn. I mean, if you're taking 50 foot and an average driveway is, I don't know, 9 feet wide, so you're having 18.
What everybody wants to do from a sales point of view is introduce a house that nobody wants to look at or purchase aesthetically. So they'll have to look at that and design something that is something that's going to be visually desirable.
It's all another story. I mean, they would have to outweigh what's going to be more of a detriment, the fact that it's visually undesirable or the fact that it's going to be a hard sell with a one-car garage and a one-car driveway. And the builder, that would obviously be up to the builder, but if the builder feels, in my own opinion, if the builder felt it looks out of place a little bit, but it's easier to sell with a two-car wide driveway, I mean, what do you think he would do? Is he more concerned with the neighborhood or more concerned with selling his house?
I think one lends itself to the other, right? I think one lends itself to the other. Ultimately, you want to make it a house that people want to purchase. You want to design a house that people want to
Is
purchase.
it true that at this point, we really don't know who is going to be developing the property? I mean, do we know?
Yes, by far.
Is there some level of commitment or the plans? How do we know? I'm just saying, could the property be flipped or developed by another entity? Is that a possibility?
I mean, it's certainly a possibility, but my client's here to subdivide it, and they're here. Well, they can come up and testify to this. But this is not something that they're looking to flip.
Well, ultimately they are.
You
Ultimately they are. I don't think we need to call them yet. We still have, I still have some board members that want to talk to your planner.
Sure, of course.
And you're done for now, Mr. President? Mr. Esposito? Mr. Bartoloni?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I guess my question is, what do you see as the public benefits of two houses versus one? What is the public benefit?
Right, so I was stressing more harmonious lot sizes, so you could achieve that, you know, that rhythm or that pattern of development on 50-foot wide lots versus the possibility of maintaining this as one 100-foot wide lot, which holds without, with it, the possibility of a much, much larger home, which could dwarf the other homes in the neighborhood and be inconsistent with the neighborhood pattern.
And are there any other public benefits other than that?
Well, just, I guess, new housing stock is the goal of virtually every suburban community. As I said, this whole area was developed in the 1940s. So what does that mean? These homes are probably 80 years old. And it's always nice to be able to upgrade a neighborhood with newer homes, create new opportunities for people, have that trickle-down effect where somebody leaves their older homes, moves to newer homes, and then some people take advantage the home they left behind. So, you know, here in Bergen County, certain parts of Bergen County, we have these pre-war homes, and eventually, at some point, they're going to need to be rehabilitated or replaced. So this is a step in the right, you know, in one direction of getting new housing stock into the municipality.
And you didn't conduct a study as to how many other properties in River Edge might be of a similar size, 100 by 150?
No, but I'm glad we're still in that discussion, because I think Mr. Grassi brought up that the lots in Block 116, and although those are not 50-foot wide lots, they're not 75-foot lots either. So the lots that you mentioned, 1 through 9 in Block 116, those are all non-conforming lots, every one of them. They don't measure up either. And had I prepared another exhibit with non-conforming lots, not just with respect to lot area, but lot width, much more of this map would be shaded in than I have shown you. I was just merely showing what would be comparable to the proposal just in terms of lot width. But maybe I was negligent not showing you the non-conforming lots as well.
And it's not our argument to the board that this type of variance may be suitable in every neighborhood, wherever there's 100-foot wide lots. We're certainly not asserting that to the board. We are asserting that there are unique characteristics to this area of Wales Avenue that would actually lend itself to subdividing these lots and actually having homes that are more in harmony with the existing 50-foot lots on the property than rather conceivably possibly having a 5,000, 6,000 square foot house on this property, which is completely out of character. In your opinion, would it be out of character?
I believe so.
So,
Would you concede, in looking at the map and just the subject area, that there are a number of lots that are similarly sized, and if the owners of those properties wanted to come to us, they could use this as precedent to say, well, you did this already. Looking at property, I think it's parcel 1, 2, 22, 6, 7, 19, 24, 5, 1, they're all similarly situated. And if all of them came and said, you know what, I want to subdivide this, my property, they would be, you know, a similar precedent if we granted this.
I don't necessarily say it's a legal precedent, because every application obviously has to be, you have to view it in its own merit. I would hope that they would come with a similar exhibit and demonstrate to you, you know, we bear the burden of proof, but we can get a variance if we demonstrate certain legal standards, right? So one of them is, if it's not going to be substantial detriment to the neighborhood, it's not going to be out of character of the neighborhood, then that's the grounds for the granting of the variance. Our point, and what I think the board, I honestly think the board acknowledges this fact that there are a lot of 50-foot wide lots in this neighborhood.
Because they were built in the 1940s, and that's what they did.
I don't think we're making that part up.
No.
There are, and that's a very unique feature of this neighborhood, which
Was it
lends itself-
many neighborhoods within the borough?
To your point.
So we're talking about setting a precedent for quite a few homes, as Mr. Bartoloni stated. And I have a question for your plan. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to ask a quick question. What would be the environmental impact on the Borough of River Edge if every 100 by 150 lot came into the board and said, you know what, we want to split it and put 2 houses? Where would we put the water then? What would be the environmental impact? If what you stated earlier, that this is a better fit for this neighborhood and for the Borough of River Edge than in Levittown, where you're going to have every house the same, what would be the environmental impact if every single house in the Borough of River Edge that had a oversized lot but could conform to the floor area ratio on a subdivision, what would be the environmental impact for water retention? Because this is a class that we've all taken. So I'm asking, I'm going back to the councilman's question. I think that's what he was trying to get at.
Only answer in your capacity as a professional planner. The testimony can't be to environmental expertise because you're only qualified.
Maybe their engineer is an expert in water management? You're an engineer, is that correct?
Maybe we can ask the question a different way.
I don't know if he can testify to what the ramifications of something like that would be.
Well, I think it's something that this board has to, because if we do set a precedent, and it is a precedent, whether you want to say it is or not, sir, you brought up this to show us that, yeah, it can be done, because you did it around the corner.
I brought the photo because there was a comment in the planner's letter, and our
But you made the statement that we did this, we allowed this, and this is right around the corner, so why shouldn't we allow, plus it's not even the same size.
Honestly, that was not my intent. My intent was to give you something visual.
So I'm gonna go back, because your planner testified that the borough would be better off if we took all the houses that had 150-foot lots and turned them into, 100-foot lots, and turn them into 50 by 150 lots. Yeah, so my question is, what do we do with the water? And if you don't have an answer, I'm gonna ask your engineer, and if your engineer doesn't have an answer, then we might have to get an environmental expert and try to figure this out, because that was his testimony.
Mr. Chairman, that's beyond the scope of our application.
Okay, let me ask the question in a different way.
Water retention in the Borough of River Edge is very important.
It's important everywhere.
But because we have a very high water level as it is.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman. But the point is, we're getting outside the scope of this application, I believe, because
I'm only going by your planner's testimony.
I assume River Edge has other zones that require more than 7,500 square feet. So not every 100 by 75 square foot lot, or could be, you can't divide every property into 7,500 square foot lots.
Actually, I think in the R1 zone you could.
The R1 zone encompasses most of the single-family homes in town with the same zoning parameters.
So, actually.
There are other zones.
Yeah, if you want to go to commercial zone, yeah, but we're talking about residential zone, which is probably, Tom, 80% River Edge? Residential zone? Close?
Yeah, so
Let me ask the impact question a different way.
Wait, before we get to you, I want to finish Mr. Bartolone,
Okay.
because I interrupted him, and I apologize for that.
Just, and, I know council instructed us to just look at the size and the scope of this project, but the requirement is for us to look at whether or not the granting of the variance substantially outweighs any potential detriments. I mean, that's the standard to which we have to adhere ourselves. And I just want to be clear, if I'm looking at a pros and cons, the pro that you brought forth is, well, it'll look like the other houses in the neighborhood, which maybe not. I mean, 62% are 50-foot width, but there's a substantial portion, 38%, which are not in that. But then you also have to look at the comment that Councilman Canigo made, impact on schools, whether or not there's environmental impact, our police, our fire, our garbage. I think we would all agree that 2 homes will have more of an impact on those municipal resources and an environmental impact. I mean, it's not, you will be using more, like, even if you want to take out water, you will be using larger quantities to heat and cool and electricity and things like that in the 2 homes than you would with 1. So there is an environmental impact inherent in that. But it would just seem to me that the cons substantially outweigh the pros at this point. So I guess, are there any other pros that I'm missing? And that's where I want to go back. I know you mentioned the one, and maybe housing stock being redeveloped, but it would seem to me, regardless, the home that's there is going to be redeveloped and be a new stock anyway. So what I want to know is what other pros are there?
I know my testimony is saying, I think I covered everything in terms of the benefits and the detriments without repeating myself.
Okay.
So we're assuming all those things that were just listed were detriment. The fact that we're going to have 2 homes here, the smaller homes, and 1 larger home. You can have a larger home on this property conceivably. It could have 5 bedrooms, right? It conceivably have 4 or 5 bedrooms. You can have just as many school children. If you have more people in a larger house, you can have just as much garbage. I mean, all these things do not arise to the level of a substantial detriment in our opinion. Because you brought it up, only because we brought it up and we talked about it a little bit. I mean, there was a lot around the corner that was subdivided. You guys indicated that was a 62-foot wide lot?
62.5.
Okay, so that created two houses, or conceivably there was one. So what's, at that point, the board had to make some kind of finding as to whether there's some substantial detriment regarding those things you just mentioned. School children, garbage, water, all those detriments that you're finding with this application, obviously were considered in that application because you created two houses. It's a subdivided lot, created two houses. In that particular situation, the variance was granted, so the board must have determined on balance that those detriments did not arise to a substantial one. I don't know why they would be different in this case.
It was a bigger
With respect
lot.
to its density.
Just to be clear, it was a bigger lot.
Bigger lot.
Not an apples to apples.
I'm only talking about school children, garbage, those detriments that were just listed by Mr. Bartolome.
Part of the equation, not the whole thing. And just to be clear, the test, you keep mentioning whether or not it's a substantial detriment. The test is actually whether or not the public benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. We've identified a number of impacts. It's up to the board to determine whether or not they are negative impacts or not. The negative criteria part of the test does talk about whether or not the variance can be granted without substantial detriments to the public good, and that they won't substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance has the 50-foot requirement. The master plan talks about preservation of the neighborhood character and so forth. So that is the test. So let's focus on the total picture, not just whether or not there's any substantial detriments, because there's more to the test.
Well, I'm relying on Mr. Carl.
I know you're John.
No, you're doing it for me.
You did a nice job.
Al, you done?
Yes, I
did.
yield my time to Mr. Cass.
He did a nice job with my question, so I'm going to yield to Mr. Craig.
Okay. Two things, just to put into maybe some perspective, the lot coverage water issue. Existing, you have 12.2% lot coverage and 19.4% improved lot coverage. The proposed construction will conform with code, which is 25 and 35%. So effectively, we're saying that we're anticipating losing or doubling kind of the lot coverage from 12% to 25%. Okay, and from 19% to 35%. So substantially more lot coverage. Without getting into engineering studies and all this other stuff, if you apply that formula to all of the lots in town that could be subdivided this way, obviously we would have a tremendous issue with rainwater and with runoff, because we'd be effectively cutting in half the available area for the water to drain. And the second part of this, and this is something I'd really like to hear some concrete information on, the argument that because this is in this neighborhood, so it's somehow going to improve the neighborhood by making smaller lot sizes and smaller houses, and that's, you know, a good enough argument to do it. I want to hear the argument that we would be able to make to the other 6 or 7 lots in this neighborhood when they come in front of us and say we want to do the same thing. And I know you said everyone's different, but they're not different. They're the same lot size, they're in the same neighborhoods. What do we say to the other 6 or 7 people that come and say, want to do the same thing, and then go into the other neighborhoods that have similar circumstances and say the same thing?
To the first part, Mr. Gray. With respect to the lot coverage, whether you have 2 lots that are 75 by 100 and they're 35% lot coverage, or you have 15,000 square foot for 35, you're going to have the same percentage of lot coverage. So you're not going to have an increase in lot coverage as a result of subdividing this in the 7,500 square foot lot necessarily.
Well, that would presuppose that somebody's going to build a house on a single lot that goes from property line to property line with a minimum setback. Unlikely, especially with the way the tax code's written here,
with how much you pay for improvements. So the odds are you have much more coverage per square foot on 2 divided lots rather than 1 large lot. I mean, it's in the numbers right here. I mean, right now, the coverage is 12%. Minimum, you're gonna have
But that's an
right.
existing house from 19,
Mhm.
you know, something. That house is not going to stay on the property.
Okay.
One way or another, that house is not staying on
Okay.
the property.
But I'd be very surprised to see that you're going to have double the coverage on the large lot, that you're gonna have the same coverage on the large lot that you would have with 2 smaller lots, because by definition, you have very small side yards, you're gonna have very, very small setbacks. You're gonna have more coverage on 2 separate lots than you would have on one.
Would we be required to handle the water? We have to submit the engineering drawings to the building department. All that would have to be handled. The second part of your question, how you explain this to everybody else?
No, not how do we explain it, how do we deny
I'm
any
sorry,
other,
remember the-
how do we deny any other application that comes in with this exact same argument? With the exact same property sizes that's on the map you showed us?
Our argument, I can only answer this inside of our application, but I'm going to try to. I would respect the board by the fact that how many questions you're asking us, I know you will. You would need to ask them, obviously they have to show you, first of all, that they have the lot area to do so. They also have to show that their property is somewhat flat, they don't have, some topography issues. We don't have that either. You also have to look to the surrounding properties to see actually how many properties would be similar to those newly created lots. And when you look at this map, there are some neighborhoods where there's a lot of them, and a strong argument could be made, in my opinion. But there's some areas where it's not as prevalent. This just happens to be, in our opinion, an area where the 50-foot lot width is extremely prevalent. And that's why we think, in this particular case, you can grant the variance. I mean, we sent out our notices to this neighborhood. Quite a few people get noticed when the lots are 50-foot wide. So, yeah, quite a few notices go out. Not that the board is putting any credence in this, but we have one objector. He's on the other side of, sorry, I don't want to get wrong.
He's on the same side as you, right down the block.
He's on the other side of the...
He's on the same side of the street, right on the corner.
On Blanco.
No,
Oh,
no, 3 houses over.
Correct, over,
It's lot 1.
Yeah.
lot 1 right here.
Yeah.
And this is the-
You know, lot 3, that would be 2 houses.
2 houses, I pointed to the street in between, by the point.
There's no street in
No.
It's a house
Two
in
lots.
between.
Is your lot?
And the
one
guy
lot
next
and
door.
a corner lot.
Who's
Go
over
to
there?
the west from your parcel, go to the west.
You could take my word for it, Counselor.
I want to know for myself, I know you're right.
It's
I
block,
have no doubt that
block
you're right.
303 lot.
Oh, 1, so over here. Okay, gotcha.
So is your
So
testimony, by the way,
So-
I just want to clarify something you said before, that this house is being developed one way or another, correct?
No, my point is...
That's
that
what you said.
I said that house
You
is
said,
not staying
I'm
there.
going to repeat exactly what you said, because I remember you said, we're going to subdivide this house, or we're going to build something bigger. One way or another, it's going to be developed. That's what you said.
I'm saying the house is not staying there one way or another.
So the house,
property was-
so it is being developed one way or another.
Well, that was the plan of the builder, yeah.
So what is the detriment, I may have to ask, what would be the detriment for the builder to build one house on that property versus 2?
We just went through all that with the planning test.
What I'm asking is,
It's more-
but you've introduced a new development, that they're gonna build one thing or they're gonna build another thing. They're either gonna build 2 houses or they're gonna build 1 house.
So we're asking for the subdivision to build.
So my question is, how, the current owner of the property, they're the current owners, not contract owners, correct? Current owners.
Yeah.
What is the detriment to the current owners being able to build 1 house versus build 2?
Detriment to the owners of
The current owners.
That's not the standard. That's not the
No, I'm
detriment
just,
to the owner.
but you,
That's not the standard for the granting of the variance.
Perhaps a better question is, can they build something on the lot that conforms to the ordinance?
Sure.
Of course.
Okay, so it's a
So then
buildable
why-
lot.
Right here for a variance, so that's why there's.
No, I get it, but it's a buildable lot. You can, it has some economic.
So if you're
value.
denied, you could still build, a house, correct?
Correct, of course.
Okay. So then there's no detriment to the owner.
Well, there is,
We tell you.
this is not, there's no detriment, obviously there's a detriment to the owner because he's looking to subdivide the lot and build two homes.
Yeah, but you can't
That's
buy
what
it,
he likes to do.
you can't purchase a lot based on thinking that you're gonna be able to come in and subdivide it.
But we're not saying that, we're not saying this is a hardship, we're saying this is a C2 variance. We're not making a C1.
Yeah, as I stated before, the applicant is trying to get this variance based on a cost-benefit analysis of whether this subdivision is going to be beneficial to the neighborhood, and whether it's going to uphold the MLUL, the land use statute, and the master plan of the town. We have to, as I said before, we have to just consider the zoning ordinance, the lot width, depth, area, and the surrounding neighborhoods with respect to the subdivision, not necessarily what's going to be on the lot.
But I did want to clarify, because he did testify to it, that what the intention was on this property.
My answer was in response to Mr. Cray's question, to let him know with respect to the lot. So we're not trying to hide anything.
No, I'm not saying you are.
I thought it was implicit that you could, everyone knew you could build one large lot on this, one large building on this lot if you wanted to.
Mhm.
So, all right, so just to sum up for me, your position is that there's a benefit to the borough to deviate from the construction code that was created with all the conditions that exist in these houses already known, because they had been built back in the 40s. And the borough created a code that said, this is the lot sizes that we want to develop. We don't want to take steps backward and make smaller non-conforming lots out of conforming lots. But your position is that, in fact, doing that is going to be better for the borough. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, and I wouldn't characterize them as smaller lots, because they're not smaller lots. They're lots that
Okay, now,
meet the minimum lot area requirements.
Okay, deviating from the conforming lot
What we're asking,
dimension.
what we're asking the board to do is accept the notion that the lots are of the correct lot area and make an adjustment for the incorrect lot width. That's essentially the crux of the case.
The incorrect lot width? Incorrect,
Right.
explain incorrect.
Non-conforming, in other words, not adverse to the zoning ordinance. So accept the fact that we achieve the implied density, we achieve the minimum required lot area, and then make an adjustment, okay, for the lot width.
Right, implied density is one parameter. The frontage, the impact, again, the things Tom talked about, light, space, et cetera, all of these things are built into the code, correct? Into lot widths, lot depths, setbacks, all of that, okay? So it's not that it's an incorrect lot width, it's a lot width that conforms with the minimum requirements, and in this case exceeds them a little bit. And your position is that we take that lot that conforms with the plans that the borough put together with the best interests of the borough in heart, and by effectively ignoring them and going back to what existed before that, those requirements went in place, that's going to be better for the borough.
I'm going to put it a different way, because I don't think that's exactly what I said. What I said was, I'm asking the board to accept two lots that meet the implied density for the zone, they meet the minimum required lot area, but they fail to meet the lot width requirement. So, again, we feel, or I feel as a planner, that the fact that it meets the lot area requirement should prevail, okay? And we can adjust the lot width by way of variance without causing harm to the neighborhood.
And just, Mr. Perry, your point before, you know, what you would say possibly, or Mr. Chairman, what you would say to other people. I mean, there's a unique feature of this lot. You have to have a 150-foot lot depth in order to meet the 7,500 square foot lot requirement for a 50-foot lot. If you look at a lot of these lots that are on the north side of Wales, all the way down, a lot of them are 122 foot deep. You know, you have 141 foot deep, a lot of lots. So all those lots, they don't have the depth.
But
And
every,
even if you subdivided them, they couldn't meet the 7,500.
but everyone north of Wales is 150.
No, you're talking about one. That's what
I,
I'm saying.
could we agree that those lots were done back in the 1940s when I don't even think that the borough had really much of a code as far as what they were gonna build? Can we agree that those houses were all built in the 1940s or generally around that area?
I think we can agree. Yeah, I would say. I mean, you know better.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's.
So, what you're asking for us to do is roll back the clock to the 1940s.
What we're asking, Mr. Chairman, honestly, what it boils down to, is we're asking the board to look at this application and determine whether the subdivided lots would be out of character with this particular neighborhood, or actually would they actually fit in with most of the homes in this particular area. If they do, then, you know, Mr. Farlvac has testified to the planning benefits of granting the subdivision in that lot width. You know, we're not creating undersized lots here. I think that's a very important distinction to make. I think this lot was something, I think that amazing, but it was subdivided. Driving down the street, these two lots look very much like the other 50-foot lots that, you know, are predominantly on Wales in this particular neighborhood.
Sir?
I'm not gonna repeat what we've heard and regurgitated many times. I think you know the issues. We just basically cleared up one thing. The map was drawn roughly in the 1940s, or to meet the 1940s housing stock needs. Even your planner agrees with that. I think your planner would also realize, and I think we all realize, 1940 needs were one thing. Today's needs, family needs have vastly changed, vastly increased, okay? So, to set your argument that 50 foot, I got a whole sheet that's 1/2 yellow on 50-foot lots, it goes back to 1940 criteria. Doesn't necessarily meet today's family need criteria. One of your main arguments is, if I keep 50-foot lots, I'm maintaining the character of the neighborhood. Your own application states, and I'll quote, the alternate would be to build one large home on the existing property. Right in your application, you just said that about 3 times in the last 10 minutes. All right? Well, your side of the table. All right. I think that one dwelling, new and large, a new one or an enlarged and added on to an expanded dwelling on this lot would improve the neighborhood, okay? And I distinctly get that feeling when I drive down the street and I look at the neighborhood and I look at your site, the particular site in question, and I see the value of the larger lot. And it does set a difference. Further, I think that your variance from the 75 required to a 50 is extremely excessive. Okay. Extremely, and it tends, in my opinion, to abuse the land, my opinion. And I don't see how we can let you shoehorn in another dwelling into this property. It just doesn't make sense. Your variance is too excessive. And I'm gonna rest at that.
Well, I would say, Mr. Mayor, we don't believe we're shoehorning it in because the lots that we are creating.
I understand that.
Are sufficient size by the way.
That's I understand your argument, but that's my personal opinion.
I appreciate it.
All right? So, and I thought I couched it as that.
Understood.
And if the chairman is ready, I'll make a motion.
I'm not ready yet.
Okay. All right.
So, you know, in thinking about this whole issue and thinking about the different lot sizes and when they were built, and quite honestly, the fact that I'm just outside your 200-foot radius, my own home, which happens to be an oversized lot, I could not see myself subdividing that property unless it was for financial gain. And financial gain to me is not a plus for the Borough of River Edge. If I owned that property and I wanted to do something with it, I would just build a bigger house. What I would not try to do, especially if it was my town, is try to, as my co-member said, shoehorn two houses into a property because the floor area ratio reaches, but the frontage doesn't. The 50-foot frontage to me, I think, is excessive. This is my opinion. I had a problem with the 62.5, but we granted it, and my thinking when I walked out of the room was, did I do the right thing? I know if I were to vote affirmative on a 50-foot lot in the town that I live in and love, I would be smacking a face into the council peoples who changed the ordinance only 15, 20 years ago to a 75-foot frontage. And at the same time, they limited the height of the houses to stop the overdevelopment of some of these properties. So that's my feeling. This is nothing personal.
No, it never is. I would just say, when it comes to financial gain and all that kind of thing, listen, we are presenting this from a land use-based argument. And there's tons of fiscal arguments that can be made. We don't deal with all that. Conceivably, the person that came in with a 62-foot lot, the two 62-foot lots, they conceivably could have built a large home on that property. They didn't. They came in here and they got approved for a subdivision. With you know.
But 62.5 versus 50 is a significant difference. They are significant.
Your opinion is your opinion.
Yes.
But our point is this. Our point is this. When you look at the numbers and you get into ratios, and this is a 33% reduction, our point is, when you look at the surrounding neighborhood and houses along rail, they're 50 feet. So our argument is that if you granted a subdivision, it would be in harmony.
We understand your
with the
argument.
neighborhood. That's, you know, if it was 62 and a half feet, the two lots we're creating, it wouldn't be, right? Because most of them are 50 feet in the area. So it's a street-by-street analysis, and we feel that in this particular location, there is a basis for granting the lot right there. Good.
Tommy, anything last that you want to throw out there?
We've, I think, heard the different positions several times, several different ways now. Ultimately, again, it goes back to the test. And again, I know you've heard the test a couple times. For the granting of a C2 variance, the board has to find that the public benefits granted substantially outweigh any potential detriments, as well as the negative criteria that the applicant has to demonstrate that the granting of the relief can be demonstrated without substantial detriment to the public good, and that the granting is not substantially contrary to the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. That's what the board has to think about evaluating their decision.
Okay, I want to ask the board to open up the meeting to the public. I have a motion?
Me.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? At this point, we open back up to the public, and I see Mr. Felice is standing back up again. There you go.
I want to thank the board for hearing this application, and I appreciate the candor of counsel of the applicant. If I can once again just reiterate the quality of life of River Edge and the effort of the community to make a decision to change the width of that property from 50 to 75. Many of the homes that where I live were built in the 1930s. So certainly the requirements of such structures and lifestyles are much different than they are today. So again, I'm not going to speak of other people because I'll be chastised by counsel, thank you. And I certainly understand, and whether it's one person that makes a comment about an application or 100, we say that you can win one election by one vote, right? And each of us have that ability to represent the voice of that individual, that family. So again, I ask that you deny these applications, and for the number of reasons that have been articulated here and that I've articulated before. And again, I'm sure you'll do what's best for River Edge and the well-being of our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this board.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public wish to speak? Gentlemen, the homeowners, do you wish to weigh in? Okay. So the answer to your
Does
question
council have
is no,
any-
you have to, I'll explain it.
Does council have any final closing remarks, or
I'll make it
everything?
real quick.
Well, I wanted to just take a motion to close to the public.
So moved. Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? Okay, final comments.
A lot of questions from the board regarding, the benefits of this. Mr. Carlback mentioned the case of Waldman versus the planning board of Warren. They believe that's specifically on point in this particular matter.
What's the site?
That is Supreme Court case 110 NJ 551, 1988. In that particular case, one of the benefits of that, of planning, the Supreme Court accepted the fact that allowing appropriate population density, zoning, granting variances, C2 variances for appropriate population density, was one of the benefits. The general public, general welfare and advances of municipal land use law. That we do think that component is here in this application due to the fact that we are trying to create two conforming lots. Notwithstanding a lot.
Non-conforming lots.
Well, conforming as to lot area.
All right, so
thank you. Conforming as to lot area, thank you, Zephyr. Since they will be 7,500 square foot lots, we do require the lot width variance, obviously, to have 50-foot wide lots. And it's our position that 50-foot lots are not out of character of the surrounding area, so they cannot possibly arise to a substantial detriment. I think the exhibit was particularly persuasive visually. You have approximately, if this subdivision was granted, 21 properties, something like 19 of them would have 50-foot lot frontages right in front of Wales Avenue, in front of our property. So we believe that the basis for granting the C2 variance has been demonstrated. We feel it's been demonstrated through professional expert testimony. And I understand the board's reservations, and I appreciate everybody's comments. As you said, Mr. Chairman, everybody, is looking at this and trying to do the right thing. But legally, I do believe the applicant has met the burden for the granting of the C2 variance.
the court case that you introduced in evidence, would you like to mark that and get a copy to our
I have
counsel?
the
I can
reference.
give you the citation.
I have the citations.
Okay. I'm just, one question on that, on what you read into evidence. Was that a conforming lot or a non-conforming lot that was?
These were subdivided into two properties. I'll give you that. dimensions.
Now, I don't need dimensions, just tell me if they were conforming or non-conforming.
They were conforming as to lot area, they were not undersized lot.
They were not undersized lots.
Right, because this is a variance case.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If they were completely conforming, there was no variance.
But you're citing that as something that could be detrimental here. if
No,
you're-
I'm citing this as a legal basis for the granting of the variance we're
But
requesting.
you just said that they're conforming lots. This is a non-conforming lot.
They're- I keep saying conforming, when I say conforming, they're conforming at the lot area, similar to this.
Were those lots conforming? Period.
Conforming? That's what I was just looking up. to see if they're-
No, Mr. Chairman, I have the case in front of me, and I could just read from it a little bit. In the Kaufman case, their lot had 167.48 feet of frontage, in a depth of 392 feet, and it covered 1.59 acres, I'm reading from the text of the case, approximately 65,000 square feet. In this case, they were looking to subdivide it into two lots of approximately, I believe it was 83.74 feet. So they were looking for about a 17% reduction in the frontage, and that was what the court was looking at. And the court in that case described it as marginally insufficient frontage. Here we're looking at a 33% reduction in our ordinance, whereas in that case it was actually a little bit less than 17%. It was at 16.3 or thereabouts.
Thank you, Mr. Marlon. So I'm guessing what he's you're echoing what he said.
No, I'm not echoing.
So is there a different, is there a different siding that you're?
I'm showing that the required lot frontage is 100 feet, and they were 84 foot.
Correct.
That's what I'm showing.
That's what I said.
Right.
So the percentages are kind of different. Kind of different.
A little bit different, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else from the board have anything? Tom? Okay, I think we've been sufficient. All right. So I'm looking for a motion to approve, is that correct? Or disapprove, or any motion?
Must any motion be positive? Or
think it would
can
be-
there be a negative motion?
Whatever you are comfortable with making the motion, it's
Okay.
fine, we'll make
So
make one.
Do we need to take a recess for a few minutes?
If you'd like to.
So you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah, I could use a break for a moment.
all right, let's take a 5-minute
You know
recess.
something, that's the best thing I've heard all night. All right, I got hit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How was treated.
Good. Okay. So motion to approve, second, and then make a motion. Right, exactly. Otherwise, are you in agreement?
And then you're not like doing double motions or anything like that. But if everyone understands that you're doing a motion to deny, and that denial actually means you're approving the application, then
Yeah,
it
no,
just
I
gets
think just
confusing.
the north.
Are you good with that? The approval?
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
have to know which way you're voting.
Yeah, we're
Affirmative or
gonna do
negative?
an affirmative vote.
So if it's an affirmative, motion, and the outcome becomes negative.
And it's a denial.
That's it, it's a denial.
That's more straightforward.
Or the other way around.
Then it gets confusing. Yeah. So if you can do affirmative, just in any motion that you ever do, probably better.
I didn't think it through quite enough. Everyone's convinced me otherwise.
And then we just have to talk a little bit about the fair housing, and hopefully we get the vote supported. It is what it is, the council's on board with it.
You haven't changed it.
They're on board with it.
I got older.
We should.
No.
How are you? Did you want to,
Former.
did you want to sit up here for a little bit?
Like we are doing when we're going.
feel at home?
But I do want to go home and watch the debate.
How are you?
Hey, big guy, good seeing you again.
I don't know, the headline is, pummeled by, Sanders. You're going.
Oh, I'm sorry. She doesn't know that yet.
One back, one there.
Yeah, I know we're missing that. When did that, we're missing that, right? When did
It started at 9. Or, no, I guess it started at 8. No, 9 o'clock, no, it's 9:40.
Mr. Police. It's always your pleasure.
Please tell me you got something better to do.
All right, folks.
Because I'll cry for you.
Yep, we'll wait for Mr. Grasso to come back.
Take the roll call.
Yep. I'm always proud of you. I know. But I get you. So great participants. Not allowed to go to the bathroom, just allowed. Sure. So we're gonna let you vote, but because of the size of the dais, I don't believe your vote will officially count. But in case somebody gets disqualified, then your vote would count. So we do allow our everybody to vote no matter what.
Just wanted to check that.
Welcome back, Mr. Grasso. Is my secretary ready for me? Let the record show it is 9:45, and we are reconvened from the recess. Can I take a roll call, please?
Mr. Sherman?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes, here.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Caslin?
Here.
Mr. Canigo?
Here.
And Mr. Esposito?
Yeah.
At this point, I am prepared to take a motion from a member of the board.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, may I offer a motion?
You can.
In the application of 297 Wales Avenue for New Jersey Properties LLC, Block 303, Lot 3. The applicant seeks relief for a minimum lot width from in the R1 zone from a minimum requirement of 75 feet to 50 feet. I make a motion that we approve this variance request.
Do I have a second?
This is just to take
To
the
vote.
vote.
Second?
Okay. Okay. Roll call, please.
Chairman Artelian?
No.
Ms. Boland?
No.
Mr. Bartoloni?
No.
Mr. Merman?
No.
Mr. Grasso?
No.
Mr. Craig?
No.
Mr. Caslin?
No.
Councilman Canigo?
No.
Mr. Esposito?
No.
All right. Unfortunately, it's been denied.
Thank you for your time,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have one more item on the agenda. We go back to the front. We're just gonna give, Tom, why don't you come up to the main table? Council, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be working on the resolution.
Okay.
Okay.
Holy cow. No, oh, wow. So,
We're gonna have to speed read.
no, not voting on this tonight.
He's been out in the park. It's got a fault in him.
You didn't have.
Can we amend it?
I'm not sure if the town borough attorney is
I don't know,
but
I don't-
I'll have
I don't-
Carol, my
This has been ratified by the council already, is that correct, Mr. Domingo?
Yes, I believe so. We're putting you on the spot now,
Tom, why don't you take center stage so we can get going?
How about the final line?
It's getting late. Just a quick, just before you even get started, what we're looking at here, the final product that you put together, is that correct?
This is it, this is.
And what we're looking at here has been already ratified by the mayor and council, is that correct?
The plan as set forth herein has essentially been approved by the mayor.
And is it a correct assumption that the borough needs to get this done in an expeditious manner to satisfy the needs of the courts?
Per the court's order, correct.
Okay. So, we have a document in front of us, take some time to go through it. We're not gonna leave until we have a vote tonight. So, let's get our vote, let's get our ducks in a row. And I apologize that you're just getting this now, but there's been a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes with our planner, our attorney, the liaisons from the council. So there's been a lot of work put into this, and unfortunately, even though we're just getting it tonight, and I'm sure nobody's pleased about that, we do need to do this expeditiously for the borough.
And I apologize for saying hard copy, but the photo sent electronic copy.
I did not receive any electronic.
I apologize for stringing this on any of you. Just to give, again, a brief overview of the document is, and again, this is the 2020 housing element and fair share plan. The housing element is one of two required components that a municipality must have as part of the master plan. The other one would be a land use plan element, something that you would have to do just to have a zoning ordinance. In addition to that, as part of the borough's June 2019 settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, the borough has, this plan, or the adoption of this plan and the components included in it are part of that settlement agreement, and the adoption of the plan is also a component of that agreement. And what participation in this whole process and this plan does is grant the borough immunity from exclusionary zoning or building remedy lawsuits, whereby a developer can basically pick out a property in the borough, say, I want to develop it with X amount of residential units, and therefore, I'll build a few of your affordable housing units. This, because the borough has a plan to address its affordable housing, it's taking an affirmative step to be proactive and address it, that it can control its zoning destiny, as opposed to having a developer come in and decide how the borough ought to address its obligation. I don't want to spend too much time on the history, it's an introduction, but just to give, I know some of you are brand new to this issue, so just to give a brief background. There's a series of New Jersey Supreme Court decisions collectively known as the Mount Laurel Doctrine, which basically established how and why municipalities in New Jersey have affordable housing obligations. Goes back to, all the way back to the 70s. In 1975, was the first Mount Laurel 1 decision by the Supreme Court, which decided that every developing municipality has a constitutional obligation to provide for its fair share of affordable housing. It basically stemmed from a group of sharecroppers in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, South Jersey, in the Cherry Hill area, who wanted to develop their land that they had been living on and sought some level of zoning approval and were denied and started this whole sort of appeal and process which ultimately landed in the Supreme Court and who made that decision. A few years go by, in 1983, the Supreme Court decides its second Mount Laurel decision, Mount Laurel 2, and decided that not only developing municipalities, but every municipality has an obligation to provide for its fair share of affordable housing. And because in that eight or so year time frame, municipalities had not acted to do anything without any clear direction, they created this builder's remedy lawsuit idea. And at the same time, they called on the state legislature to enact legislation to create a process so municipalities could do something about affordable housing. So the state legislature did adhere to that, and in 1985 enacted the Fair Housing Act, which creates the framework for the Council on Affordable Housing, the COA, as they've become to be known, and and for a long time, they were responsible for administering and determining affordable housing need numbers for the state, which trickled down to individual municipal affordable housing need obligations. 1986, the Supreme Court decides Mount Laurel 3, basically the validation of the Fair Housing Act. COA then, once it's created, comes up with its set of standards and set of rules, and has its first round, as it's known, of affordable housing obligations, which stems from 1987 to 1993, based on what was known as a fair share methodology. Second round was from 1993 to 1999, following the same methodology. The third round then was supposed to start in 1999, but COA had changed its methodology to what was called a growth share methodology, which was ultimately invalidated. There were several iterations of that methodology, and had gone back and forth to the Supreme Court, who directed them to create a new set of guidelines, and ultimately when it came down to a vote with COA, they had a split vote and couldn't get anything done. So at that point, the court had been fed up, and in March 2015, in the Mount Laurel 4 decision, the Supreme Court returned jurisdiction back to the trial court. So where it started with the courts, went to COA, it is now back with the courts. In that decision, the court provided some level of guidance, but no housing need numbers, but did sort of describe or prescribe a process. And so since 2015, that's kind of where the borough's been, and all these towns have been, that you might have been reading in the newspaper, that this decision started all that. So within the last 5 years, the towns have had to try to figure out how, what's their obligation, and how they're going to address that. After the 2015 decision, there was a question that had lingered, so in January 2017, there was another decision, the gap period decision, which determined that, and this had been a contentious issue up to that point, that towns did in fact have an obligation to address the period 1999 to 2015, when COA was effectively dysfunctional. So rounds 1 and 2, you have 6-year periods. Third round, now you're looking at periods from 1999 to 2025 to address affordable housing obligations. So that's the history, that's the background. The borough's participation and addressing its affordable housing obligation goes all the way back to the first round. 1988, the borough adopts its first round housing element fair share plan. At the time, they had been given an assigned 124 units of affordable housing. There's a process as part of the rules and regulations called the vacant land adjustment, whereby a town can basically assess its development potential, analyze vacant land, environmental constraints to try to reduce that number. The borough did at the time, so it went from 124 units and was reduced down to 92 units, recognizing that the borough was and still is, for the most part, a fully developed community. The borough at the time's fair share plan addressed those 92 units through the senior residents at St. Peter's and what were known as regional contribution agreements. Basically, at that time, municipalities were able to spend money on a per unit basis and transfer that out to another town, like Jersey City, Newark, New Brunswick, etc. That provision or that mechanism is no longer allowed. That's something that's been thrown out, but at the time it was fair game. Some years go by, 2009, the borough did hire a planner to do a third round plan, but because of COA's inaction and dysfunction, didn't move much further than that. So fast forward to July 2015, again right after the Supreme Court's March 2015 Mount Laurel 4 decision, the borough decides to participate again to avoid these, perceived vulnerabilities to its zoning ordinances and builders remedy lawsuits, exclusionary zoning lawsuits, etc. It decided to participate, and ultimately through negotiations, a long period of negotiations, did reach a settlement agreement in June of 2019 with Fair Share Housing Center, who was the other party to all of this, and who had been the entity in a party of all of the other municipal negotiations and cases, really. So to the plan itself, the housing element fair share plan is divided into 3 sections. First, you have the housing element, which basically gives an overview of the borough's development pattern, demographics, economic data, and trends. Then there's the fair share obligation, what the borough's actual affordable housing numbers are, and then the fair share plan to address that in accordance with the prevailing requirements. housing element itself, again, talks about the borough's fully developed character, suburb of New York City with good regional access, primarily residential with single-family homes, although there are some areas with multifamily and townhouses, and commercial really restricted to Kinnecumach Road and the southerly areas of the borough around Newbridge and the train station. Population has generally remained stable for the last couple of decades. There has been an observed increase in incomes, home values, and it's generally recognized that the borough's housing stock is older and built really pre-1970s for the most part. Jumping ahead, and that's, some of it's interesting if you want to spend your time to look at the demographics and stuff, but I won't keep you here to do that. So jumping ahead to the fair share obligation and what the borough's ultimate number was. For a time, since 2015, there were, I guess, a few different positions on what the statewide number should be. On the one hand, you had the municipal consortium, which the borough was part of, about 200-something towns. They had an expert. They came up with a statewide number. I think it was about 92,000 statewide, which they've got figured out. On the other extreme was the Fair Share Housing Center, the advocate for affordable housing. Their number was upwards of 300,000 statewide. So that was where the negotiating came in and what number should prevail. There was a subsequent court decision which basically came into the middle. Ultimately, the borough did reach a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, and so its obligation for the third round, again, 1999 to 2025, has three components. One is a rehabilitation component, which has to do with the assessment of substandard housing, basically, in the borough. We estimated there's about 6 units that adhere to those parameters. There's the prior round obligation, which is the period which covers rounds 1 and 2, so 1987 to 1999, and that obligation is 73 units. It was then estimated that the borough's third round obligation, 1999 to 2025, would be 197 units. However, we did that vacant land analysis to evaluate the borough's development potential, and that number was whittled down to 0 units. So it was determined that the borough's realistic development potential, as it's known, is essentially 0. What does that mean? So the borough has to address its prior round obligation of 73 units. That was non-negotiable. That's not part of the deal. While the third round number was determined to be 0 units, we did have to look at the existing redevelopment sites that were in town. They were scaled down a bit. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we had to look at another overlay zone that ended up being the Paddington area. So jump into the fair share plan of how those different obligations are more specifically addressed. The 73-unit obligation is addressed by, again, the St. Peter senior residents, the 18 of the 23 units there. There are 3 existing group homes in the borough in single-family neighborhoods that cater to the developmentally disabled. There is the Newbridge Landing Station redevelopment area, which was established about 10 years ago. We're just looking to now modify the parameters of that redevelopment plan, and same with the Kinnecumach Road redevelopment area. So, the St. Peter facility, I'm sure all of you know where St. Peter's Church is. It's basically annexed to that. The group homes are located on Julie Court, Zabriskie Place, and there's another one on Valley Road. The Newbridge Landing Station redevelopment area is essentially around the Newbridge Landing train station, so it encompasses both the NJ Transit lots and also the borough-owned lots. I think it's a total of like 3.8 acres. And what was ultimately decided by the governing body and Fair Share Housing Center was a density of 25 units per acre, which for transit-oriented development is reasonable, but it's actually scaled down considerably. I forget what the exact number was that had been on the books for the site from the prior redevelopment plan. So I think it went from possibly several hundred units down to, I think, 92 or somewhere thereabouts that could be built there in a mixed-use setting with the train station and some level of public parking.
What are the bonus credits on that?
Well, you can get up to 25% bonus credits for the round. So if the obligation was 73 units for the prior round, you can get 25% credits. So that amounts to 19. And then you divvy that up between your different plan mechanisms or sites. Yeah, so this site itself generated 19 units for the prior. Kindercamac Road redevelopment area has been scaled back, or will be scaled back to 20 units per acre. Previously, I think an eight-story building was contemplated there, and whatever that density was, this will probably be closer to a 3 or 4 story building once we hash out the development details. And because we have a 0-unit obligation, realistic development potential, development potential, the difference between that and the third round obligation of the 197 units is what's known as unmet need. And the idea is that you don't have to satisfy that in full, but you have to make a good faith effort to satisfy as much of that as you can. And because the borough had these redevelopment sites, they became a component of it. We also were able to use the new apartments on Kindercamac Road and the bridge crossing. I think there's 7 senior units there. Whatever was left over from St. Peter's Church senior residence, there is the multifamily and senior conditional use district, which encompasses the New Bridge apartments and the residential house lots north of that on the east side of Kindercamac Road. And as part of the deal with Fair Share Housing Center, the borough agreed to create an overlay zone over essentially the batting cage lots. So it include BP, the batting cage facility, and where Ethan Allen used to be. So 3 lots, I think it's 2.5 acres, at a density of 20 units per acre, just 2 or 3 blocks from the train station. It's an overlay zone, which means that the underlying commercial zoning still stays in place, but a developer has the opportunity to make residential housing and thereby create affordable housing. We had to create the opportunity. That's the charge, the whole process. There are also a number of generic sort of model affordable housing ordinances that the borough will have to adopt soon. And that's something that will be dealt with at the council level. The borough, this board most likely will be reviewing the overlay ordinance and redevelopment plans to become master plan consistency. And moving forward, once we adopt all that we have to adopt, there will be a compliance hearing whereby the court will grant a judgment of compliance and repose and grant substantive certification, meaning the borough will have its immunity extended to the end of the 3rd round to July 2025. Doesn't have to worry about exclusionary zoning lawsuits. And that, again, the point of participating in all of this is to maintain the borough's zoning control to the extent that it can. So this board has the opportunity tonight, and I would recommend that they do so, to adopt this plan as has been required. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Sorry I had to breeze through it the way I did, but it is what it is.
Because we're kind of an executive session, I'll just leave it informal. Just speak up.
Does this have to be recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just curious.
Anybody have
You
any
gave,
questions?
you gave us a lot there.
I
And a very convincing. And I don't know if you could put a number on it, but as we sit today, what is the rough obligation, number of units that River Edge has?
Existing or proposed?
Remaining.
So we've satisfied by virtue of those mechanisms, St. Peter's,
Right,
the
right.
redevelopment plans, we've satisfied the 73 units.
Right.
3rd round, we have no obligation per se, but we had to recognize these other planning
Right.
Mechanisms to address what we could of that 197 units. So the number 197, again, is what was assigned to the borough, but not that we have to address it entirely, but we have to try to address it the best we can. And that was part of the negotiations was Fair Share Housing Center looking at certain sites. We had to look at sites basically with redevelopment potential and sites that had existing zoning. So the only new development really would be the overlay zone around the
Right.
batting cages. Otherwise, the
Right.
redevelopment plans are already in place. We've scaled them down considerably into something more, I guess, reasonable or even developable. I mean, it's been 10 years they haven't been developed.
Okay. So assuming that the borough approves the overlay, approves development based on the overlay, what would be remaining after that? We still have to whittle down that 190?
Well,
number?
what I presume will happen will be that because the borough had technically its third round obligation, or realistic development potential is zero, right? That's more or less the obligation. In 2025, depending which way this goes, there'll either be a new process or there'll be a subsequent round where everything gets reevaluated again. And go through, if things were to stay the same, we'd do another vacant land analysis to basically come up with the borough is fully developed. So then you'd look at any sites that have been developed between now and 2025, and likely you would look at any other redevelopment opportunities. That's what it would look like.
Okay. So somebody came in with a larger housing proposal between now and 2025. It would behoove us to make sure there were affordable units in there.
One caveat, so one of those generic affordable housing ordinances requires that any development of 5 units or more would have to have affordable.
20%?
Well, if it's a rental development, it's 15%. If it's a for sale development, like townhouses or condos, it's 20%. So there is a built-in requirement that's sort of a town-wide overlay.
So if we kept any development to 4 units and less, we'd be okay. Was that oversimplifying?
You still have the obligation.
Yeah, I don't think fair housing is.
It wouldn't require affordable housing.
Appreciate that.
But
I mean,
Probably see through that.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. A whole other
I'm
story.
always looking for a way out.
It depends on the situation, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, we'll see,
So-
we'll see if anything comes up.
So that 197 number, we have to try to mitigate by 2025, is that?
Not mitigate, by these mechanisms, we've established that we're making a good faith effort. And the idea is you have to create a realistic opportunity, and it's been determined by the court, by Fair Share Housing Center, that looking this plan creates a realistic opportunity. And I mean, it's a decent deal if you've read the papers lately. I know certain other towns are getting hammered now.
It is a sad state of affairs.
So is the point of the rounds to overall look over the state and just find new places to put these?
Well, I think the rounds were to sort of assess what the state needed, and I mean, could there ever be enough affordable? I don't know, that depends who you ask, but, it basically to do a periodic assessment and then look to see what, how the towns have developed, not developed. I mean, River Edge itself is a fully developed town, a lot of towns are very county developed, but if you go to Mercer County or more, I mean, they're still developing, there's still farmland.
So they're just basically going through and just making sure that opportunities are being explored, so we won't necessarily continue to have to look for more opportunities in 2050, 2025, 30, and...
At some point, what River Edge has may be sufficient to answer your question. And again, the process may change if the legislature does anything with it, they may not. I mean, we're talking about 5 years from now, it's not a long time for who knows? Who knows about it? So there'll either be a 4th round, or the conditions will change and it'll be a whole new process. And that's anyone's guess.
It's never going away.
So I'm just gonna warn everybody on the board. I'm gonna warn everybody on the board, 2025, not that far away. 24 years ago, I was appointed to the board, and I said, oh, good, I can do my 4 years and I'll be done. So you'll probably all be here in 2025, or most of you. So, just keep that in the back of your head, that we're gonna have to deal with this again. But until now, and, by the way, Mr. Felice, again, I want to recognize Mr. Felice for the time he put up here, and I'm sure he's sitting here saying to himself, thank God they had to do it instead of us back in the day.
Thank God.
So, any more comments on this?
One of the requirements I was looking at is a spending plan. It's page, is it 6 of the settlement agreement?
So a spending plan,
Is that to fix up those 6 houses?
it's to fix up the 6 houses. So part of this whole process is that a development fee ordinance has to be established, and this is one of those standard template things that just part of the deal, essentially. So for certain types of development, there'll be some fee that goes through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That trust fund is then used to rehabilitate those, qualifying units for, of low, moderate income houses that are substandard for, home improvement projects. And so basically, it's how the town allocates its affordable housing trust fund money, we have to spend it a certain way.
But the town has to generate that housing money through some type of...
It's through the development fee ordinance, it will collect some amount of money. It does have to set aside some amount for its rehabilitation obligation, which is true, to support, I think the plan is to support Bergen County's program, because administering its own program is not...
Looking for the site.
For the scale.
And those fees come from where? From commercial development or residential construction? Where does it come from?
It's both. I forget the exact parameters, and they are different percentages, so I think on the residential end, it might be more than 1.5%, and commercial end might be 2.5%.
On a construction, when you go for a construction permit?
I don't know what the trigger is.
CO.
He signed the home, right? Thank you.
Okay, so it's the cost of the CO, not... It's the file, as built. Okay. Gotcha.
Tom, the court approved the settlement agreement?
They did. So we had a fairness hearing in September 2019. So they determined this was fair, it was compliant, and then that kick-started the compliance process where, okay, now you've got to do all this stuff. And adopting this and the ordinances are part of that compliance.
And this is just one of the first steps. You'll be seeing more of these things, like you mentioned, the spending plan will come along soon.
As a matter of fact.
And then the redevelopment plans have to be tweaked somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Anybody else?
If anyone in Rio, I know there's a lot, feel free to call me.
Well, after the vote, won't really
I
matter.
I mean, much of this is in that settlement agreement. So
Tom, I have full trust in you, and I know you got us a good deal, and you were well represented by our council. So, on that note, I will entertain a motion to accept the fair housing element and fair share plan as written.
So moved.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Ms. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Bartoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Yes.
Councilman Canito?
I vote on this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
And Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
And Mr. Felice.
And you can vote.
All right, I want to thank everybody for your indulgence a few minutes late tonight, but we did some good work, and sometimes we can't always say yes. So on that note, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstained? Thank you so much, everybody.
I think I want to go out and have a drink with us.
So we have